Chapter 1246. Prince paused for a moment. Chi Nemo glanced up, gesturing for him to pick up the call. Prince pressed the answer button. Kwang's laughter could be heard. He sounded extremely refined. "I'm really sorry, I received news that someone leaked our meeting location. I'm investigating what exactly went wrong." "Leaked? How was that possible?" Prince instinctively wanted to deny it. Chi Nemo moved his fingers, indicating for him to cancel today's meeting. Cancel? Prince thought he had misread the gesture, but when he glanced at his boss's face, he knew what to say. But when she looked at her boss's face again, she knew what to say. "Since there's a problem, let's not meet up for now. Find out who leaked the news and kill them. I have so many connections here. If someone finds out that my family met up with you, I'll be the one in trouble. My brother definitely won't forgive me. He's beside me right now. He was just scolding me, saying that I don't have a brain. You're being too serious. Don't worry, as long as you don't leak the information, everything will be safe." Kwang seemed to be implying something, but at this moment, he smiled. "But you can't go to the meeting location I sent you previously, I'll send you another address." Prince didn't agree immediately, instead, he was worried. "Are you sure it's fine? You can ask around, there won't be any problems if you're serious about working with me." Kwang smiled faintly. Prince's tone was one of complete trust. "All right, send me the address, I'll head over with my brother." "All right." Kwang hung up, the smile on his face not fading. Scorpion heaved a sigh of relief. He had been worried that King would trick the other party. After all, the other party was someone he wanted to work with. If there was a problem on the way, he wouldn't be in a good position. After all, Scorpion knew very well that no one had said that the news of their meeting had been leaked. King's intention in making this call was very obvious. He wanted to naturally change the meeting location and disrupt the other party's rhythm. Only then would he know if there was a problem with them. Until now, the other party's reaction has been the same as a buyer, including his worry. Kwang's gaze dimmed. "Take the call first, I won't believe it unless we meet face to face." "Yes." Scorpion accepted the order and began to make preparations. On the other side, Prince broke out in a cold sweat again. He finally realized that Kwang had been bluffing him. If he had said that it was impossible, it wouldn't have suited his identity as a buyer. Buyers would be more concerned about whether the transaction was really safe, whether the supply was good enough, and how the price and benefits would be. Kwang's words hinted at the question. Perhaps only boss would be able to respond at the first moment. Prince finally understood why his boss was the only one who could complete this mission. Other than their boss, anyone who came would lose to Kwang in terms of psychological testing. In the end, they would all be wiped out. The change in location once again showed how suspicious Kwang was of them. Chi Nemo knew that the other party wanted to catch them off guard, so he was especially calm and adjusted his state of mind. He didn't mess up his initial plan. As usual, they drove 3 cars out. Fatty's car was especially low-key, and after the first 2 cars drove out, he didn't immediately follow. Since they were in the MT area, Chi Nemo would definitely consider spies. "Boss, there's a car following us in the 9:00 direction." Hunter turned the steering wheel, turning to look at the reflection in the rearview mirror. He frowned. Chi Nemo seemed to be resting. "Normal, continue driving." "Fatty, is there anyone following you?" "No, according to boss, we set off 3 minutes later." "It's really peaceful," Fatty replied as he adjusted the rearview mirror back to its original position. He looked at the order of the cars on the viaduct. Chi Nemo and the others were the first to pass, followed by the people Kwang had sent to watch them. Finally, it was Fatty. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. It seemed magical, but it was also mentally taxing. The person sitting in the car. Only Doctor knew why his boss's every move was so precise. From the moment the phone rang, he had been constantly writing about Kwang's psychological profile. Everything looked very peaceful. But in reality, boss's battle had started earlier than them. Doctor wasn't worried that his boss would be wrong in this aspect. He was worried about his boss's psychological state. Swoosh. The car door opened. Someone walked over. It was Scorpion. It was enough to show Kwang's sincerity by sending Scorpion over. Scorpion had assumed that the person sitting in the boss seat would be the familiar prince. He hadn't expected it to be someone else. He arched a brow. Who is this? Prince glanced at his boss fearfully. Compared to his usual self, he seemed more restrained. My brother. Scorpion was enlightened. At the same time, he understood something. The real boss had arrived. Hello, I'm Scorpion. I've heard of your name. Scorpion stretched his hand out. Chin Mo was natural, not bothering to conceal his powerful aura. I've heard about you from Consultant. Scorpion was even more certain that there wouldn't be any unpleasantness in this collaboration. Why didn't I see Consultant today? There are some accounts that I need him to check. I see. Scorpion didn't ask further. He lifted the black cloth in his hand. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble everyone to cooperate. Chin Mo didn't agree immediately, his impatience obvious. He even frowned. What's the meaning of this? Sometimes, the stronger your attitude, the softer the other party's attitude. Scorpion was like that. From his point of view, Chin Mo was rich and knew how to do business. In the future, the benefits from their collaboration would be huge. He couldn't offend him over such a small matter. The checks have been strict recently. According to the rules of the underworld, the first time you enter, there are too many things planted inside. If the location is known, everything will be gone. Please understand. Scorpion was ruthless when he was sinister, but when he wasn't, he was good with words. This type of person had to be careful. It wasn't without reason that Kwang had sent him. Chapter 1247. Scorpion heard the warning and immediately said, of course, once we earn money in the future, we will all be on the same side. Sorry for offending you this time. His words were polite. But Scorpion's wrist was firm. He lifted the black cloth and wrapped it 3 more times. Everyone was now in a state of darkness. They couldn't see anything. They couldn't even see the scanning rod when it passed by. But they could still feel it. Especially Chin Mo, he knew what was going on even when he was standing there. The person in charge of scanning shook his head at Scorpion, implying that there was no problem. Scorpion didn't speak, he raised his hand and pointed at his ear. The person in charge of scanning understood and pretended to sweep past Chin Mo's ear, but in reality, he was checking for a small Bluetooth earpiece. The alarm didn't sound, which meant everything was normal. Scorpion laughed. Come, I'll get in first. The 5 of them were arranged in a commercial car, and Wolf was holding the deposit in his hand. Even though he was blindfolded, Chin Mo's aura was so strong that it was hard to ignore him. Scorpion was very satisfied, and he gestured to the driver. What he didn't notice was, Chin Mo, who was leaning sideways, tapped lightly on his watch. The signal was activated. Fatty immediately placed his fingers on the keyboard and typed furiously in order to lock onto the position of the red dot. Finally. Fatty heaved a sigh of relief, moving towards the red dot. At the start, he didn't think much of it. But after walking for a while, he realized they were going in circles. Fatty was still worried about how to inform his boss. Actually, there wasn't a need to inform him. Because Chin Mo had already sent Scorpion leading them in circles. Perhaps other special forces soldiers wouldn't be outstanding even if they were trained in this area. But for Chin Mo, observing his surroundings was his forte as a criminal psychologist. It wasn't just through images, but also through sounds and senses. The same hawker had floated over 3 times. Besides, it wasn't just the hawker, the number of turns was the same as well. Chin Mo tilted his head. Blindfolded, he looked extremely harmless. But in reality, both the military doctor and magician knew. Once they entered mission mode, their boss wouldn't stop his analysis. After all, time was tight to make a deal. Scorpion took another detour, but it was only a small one. Soon, the car stopped. "Sorry to trouble you, sir. I need to change my mode of transportation." Scorpion was also very careful with his words and would not reveal any information. However, it was not difficult to tell where they were. The smell of water was strong. In addition, when they lifted their legs, there was a shaking sound. It was obvious that they were on a boat. A rattling sound rang out. Chin Mo could tell that it was the sound of a small speedboat's engine with just one listen. It seemed that they were very close to their destination. Chin Mo moved his fingers. When the speedboat started moving, the water splashed onto his hair. Separated by the black cloth, he looked calm as though he was a guest. This completely dispelled Scorpion's suspicions. However, there was a problem on Fatty's side. Suddenly, there was a network error notification. 1 second ago, Fatty was still using the network to track the signal, and the red dot was still at the address he had locked onto. The next second, the red dot had disappeared. Chapter 1248. The signal was cut off. Fatty wasn't the only one whose expression changed because of the sudden danger. Even the people sitting in the meeting room clenched their fists. This time, the operation team was truly alone and without help. Even after giving the highest order and gathering everyone's strength, including the national defense, they still couldn't reconnect the signal. When Chin Mo realized that there was no signal, it was already 10 minutes later. After all, he was blindfolded and the others weren't talking, so he really couldn't notice the abnormality on his watch. It was just that the previous few times when the message was transmitted, the watch would vibrate slightly. This time, it didn't. Chin Mo's eyes dimmed. Listening to the sound of the speedboat gliding past his ears, his emotions didn't change at all. The military doctor also knew that they had boarded the boat. Every special force soldier had the ability to sense the flow of water, let alone this group of people. But only the military doctor knew that any sound of water, especially in such an environment, could easily leave a psychological impression on Chin Mo. Whenever it rained, his boss's mood would be extremely bad. It wasn't without reason. The shadow that day on his boss still existed. The military doctor was even worried that it was related to the psychological suggestion. Time passed slowly. There was no progress in the meeting room. Fatty tried his best to think of a way but still couldn't lock onto the target. In the end, there was news that there was signal interference equipment inside. The radiation range was very wide, which was why it was easy for the plane to lose direction in this vicinity. In addition, when looking down, other than the complicated river below, there was only lush jungle. It was difficult to see the state of the situation inside, so there was no way to provide any support. The operation team had lost contact for half an hour. No one could predict what would happen in this half an hour. No news at this time might be the best news. The position of the sun moved down a little and the surrounding scenery also changed. It had to be said that this place was really beautiful, but that kind of beauty seemed to hide danger. The river narrowed. Not far away, there were mercenaries with guns in their hands. Some sat on the boat, some stood on the shore, as if they were patrolling. Unexpectedly, some of them were young, even the youngest was only 10 years old. Perhaps this was the real Golden Triangle. Because it was a lawless area, and because it wasn't peaceful, even children would carry guns. They were not poor. Even if stacks of money were to pass by them, they might not even blink. This place was rich in poppies. Everyone knew that there was no business in the world that could bring in money faster than poppies. What they lack is love. They didn't have parents, and even if they did, they were just slaves. He had been raised by Kwang's side since he was young and was different from the other children. Their eyes were even colder than ordinary people's. This was the scene that Prince saw when his blindfold was removed. He stood there in a daze, unable to believe his eyes. Scorpion stood to the side and laughed, "Welcome to our paradise. From here on out, no one will be able to disturb our cooperation." Chapter 1249. Scorpion lifted his chin, gesturing for him to look into the depths of the forest. Chi Nemo tilted his head. The first thing he saw were two metal tower-like buildings. Every Special Forces soldier had received training in this area. Some reacted slowly while others reacted quickly. Chi Nemo took a glance and understood what it was. It was a signal interference tower. Not bad. He put one hand into his trouser pocket and said slowly, "In this way, our cooperation will be more secure." Scorpion laughed. "Boss Rome, you know your stuff." Prince's gaze was still on the children. Scorpion noticed it, turning his head over. "Why?" "Second young master hasn't seen them before." Prince admitted carelessly. "They are so young, I haven't seen them before." "Do they know how to shoot?" "Second young master Rome, don't underestimate them." The corners of Scorpion's lips curled up slowly. Sometimes, they are the most useful when dealing with special forces trying to sneak in. Prince tried his best to look natural. "Are you serious?" "Of course." Scorpion sized him up. Second young master's expression when he looks at them is similar to the expressions of special forces soldiers. But the difference is that second young master doesn't look like a special forces soldier. Prince didn't move. Chi Nemo spoke up at this moment. "That's why I let him come out to see the world. He is well protected at home. My brother's biggest flaw is that he isn't ruthless enough." With that, Chi Nemo glanced at Prince. That glance made Scorpion give up on some thoughts. After all, the second son of some families was indeed like that. Moreover, he was a rich fool. He smiled. "Boss Rome, this way please." Chi Nemo didn't say anything else. He stuffed a hand into his pocket, walking past the two boys who were gambling with their guns. His aura was as strong as ever. Prince was startled. He understood that his reaction just now might have been seen through. He immediately returned to his role, reaching out to touch the bridge of his nose. Just like a useless nouveau riche, he followed behind Chi Nemo. Every scene made one's heart skip a beat. There was even a sense of repulsion towards this place from the bottom of their hearts. Scorpion called this place heaven, but in Prince's eyes, it was no different from hell. Although it is sunny and beautiful. But the things these children did made people feel a chill run down their spines. Magician, who was standing at the side, felt the same way. It wasn't because of the children, but because after seeing the building, they understood why their boss had asked Scorpion that question. Firstly, it was to lower Scorpion's guard, and secondly, it was to tell them that there was no signal here. All of their communication would have to be done through other means. From now on, they would not have any external help. Keeping himself alive and not exposing his identity was more important than anything else. Who would have thought that Kwang would hide in such a place? There was even a checkpoint on the river. Most importantly, if they continued to head east, they would reach the border of China. This was what the entire operation team was most concerned about, including Chi Nemo. Because they would absolutely not tolerate any person or organization growing stronger day by day in a place so close to Huaxia, eyeing covetously like a tiger watching its prey. On the other side of the river, on a small road 50 kilometers away, a black Lamborghini roared past. It wasn't strange to see luxurious cars here, but most of them drove off-road vehicles, not this model. The AI system had already issued 3 consecutive warnings. When little Blackie predicted the next slope, he reminded the driver sincerely, "Master, slow down, really, I'm so handsome, if I drag the bottom, it would look like a pair of leather shoes opening its mouth, it would be an awkward scene." Bojo arched a brow, not intending to be gentle. Little Blackie could only activate the self-rescue function when the bottom of the car came into contact with the huge pit. In the end, there was still a little smoke, but fortunately, it wasn't injured internally. As a broken car that relied on its looks to survive till now. It wasn't easy. Bojo ignored little Blackie's next words. Bojo opened the car door, walking into a mobile market. She wasn't sure if it was because of the environment. Many of them had broken arms and legs. Bojo could roughly guess why they were in such a state. Here, those who weren't willing to sell drugs would have their arms or legs broken. Now, the shadows of the flowers could no longer be seen, they had all turned into villages and crops. But the sales of drugs didn't decrease. It was probably because there was a need, there was a market. Those who took drugs out of curiosity or other reasons. They would never know that there were some people who lived at the edge of hell. They wouldn't compromise for something in their hearts. They knew better than anyone else how much destruction this thing could bring to a family. Hence, even if they had their arms and legs broken, they didn't want to participate. Who could understand their feelings? They weren't soldiers, they weren't even Chinese. They were ordinary citizens, all of them hoped that they had never harmed anyone. Sometimes, the heavens would give some people the best living environment. But those people didn't have a shred of conscience. Those who live at the bottom of society can emit light in their eyes. Because of this. That was why they wanted to destroy the hell that Kuang had created. Bojo raised her hand, lifting a black curtain. Sometimes, what people lacked the most was medicine. Behind the black curtain, there would usually be a Mongolian doctor. This time, he was the one who provided the medicine to Bojo. The moment Bojo entered, he moved back and forth. "Honestly, I really didn't want to prepare these for you. You should know that if you go against Kuang here, you will have to collect your corpse tomorrow. But after some thought, going against you hackers isn't going to end well either, after all." Bojo's expression turned serious. She looked at Bojo and said, "That's right, I didn't want to prepare these for you." With that, the Mongolian doctor suddenly paused, his eyes brightening as he looked at Bojo. Why are you here?" Bojo paused. "We don't know each other, right?" She definitely had an impression of such a unique breed. "Also, you put the cold medicine and diarrhea medicine together." Oh, the medicine is the same," he replied seriously. Chapter 1250. That's not right. This isn't the time for that. The Mongolian doctor was still wearing his mask when he placed the medicine down. "I've seen you play before, you're so handsome. Why aren't you competing? Why are you here? Don't tell me you aren't going to compete. I've already bought the tickets for the Asian Cup, I'm telling you. If you aren't participating, I'll kill the tickets." Bojo, the Mongolian doctor paused before adding shyly, "I'm your fan." Bojo was thinking about how to reply. The Mongolian doctor introduced himself once more. "The moment your name appears on the live stream platform, I'll appear and I'll be the one who receives the most gifts." Bojo replied calmly, "You've got the wrong person." "I've got the wrong person." The Mongolian doctor removed his mask. "Don't underestimate the power of fans. Wait a minute, your skin has indeed turned darker and your nose isn't as straight as before. Is this the effect of breaking away from your fantasy? No, that's not right, isn't it a disguise? F***ck, why am I so dumb? It's definitely a disguise. You probably won't need the paint I prepared for you, it'll save on costs. Bojo smiled. You call that saving? I'm saving it for your gifts, the Mongolian doctor replied confidently. Bojo thought, you might as well give me something more practical. In the end, she knocked on the table. Give me the things. The Mongolian doctor became more reliable when it came to serious matters. It's all here, I'll give you something else. Most importantly, God K. When you head out later, go for a stroll so Kwang won't be able to lock onto me. I'll use these 2 days to leave. I'll give you the medicine for free, there are too many poisonous snakes in the forest, it's better to be prepared. Bojo swept a glance at the medicine box, smiling. I won't need the sulfur, do you have anesthetics? Give me a dozen needles. The Mongolian doctor was cooperative, but he did not expect his idol to take away all his belongings. After a moment, he turned towards her back view. Honestly, you should return to Supreme Alliance, it doesn't matter if you're a girl. Take me for example, after I found out you're a girl, my first reaction was to marry you. I just don't know if you have a boyfriend. I do. This was the first time Bojo had answered the Mongolian doctor's question. She seemed to have thought of someone, her lips curling into a smile. He's great, I'm planning to propose to him. The Mongolian doctor was stunned. Not only did he suddenly fall out of love, he was also fed a wave of dog food. You're a girl, why are you proposing? Bojo couldn't hear the Mongolian doctor's cries in his heart. After all the preparations were done, the car sped off the accelerator. No matter what. She wanted to find the Almighty and send him back to Jiang City. Just like what the Mongolian doctor said. There was still an Asian competition waiting for them in Rivertown. Not for anyone. But for himself. Only in the esports arena. That was the true joy of that person. There are still 20 kilometers to the destination. A river has been detected ahead. Do you want to change your form? Xiao Hei's voice came over. Bojo swung her tail. Change. Chapter 1251. When the number 1 appeared, Bojo's right hand moved. She shifted the gears and accelerated. She held onto the steering wheel and drove the car into the water. Everyone knew that once a car entered the river, the water would rush over from all directions, seeping through the gaps in the glass. Within a few seconds, the car would be completely filled with water, and the entire car would sink, as if it was submerged from top to bottom. The people inside wouldn't be able to escape. However, the moment the car entered the water, there was an obvious change to the car window. As the entire car was submerged, there was a loud rumble. The Lamborghini's bat-like door retracted and the tires changed directions. It was as though the car was sliding. Even though the appearance didn't change, the function was completely different. It wasn't just waterproof, it had its own propeller. The movement of the water was enough to propel the car forward. The headlights in front were 5 times brighter than usual. This way, even in the water, they would be able to see the road in front clearly. Status change complete. Switch to water mode. Travel distance is 40 miles. Sufficient fuel. The detected problem is the water pressure is unstable. Manual propulsion is required. The smart navigation system fluctuated one curve after another. Bojo leaned back and looked up. She pressed the button on the sunroof and the hidden propeller rose. Accelerate. 2 words came out of her mouth. The smart navigation system responded to the corresponding force. The propeller spun faster and faster. The speed was almost twice as fast as before. The fish that were still swimming in the water dispersed. They didn't understand why such a huge fellow would enter their territory. Time trickled by. It was 4 p.m. in the afternoon. The sun shone down and pushed aside the thick fog. There was a vast expanse of flat land. The moment they reached the riverbank, Scorpion arranged for them to board an off-road vehicle. The only difference was that this time, they weren't blindfolded. Because of this, the Crown Prince felt it even more deeply. This place was too beautiful. It was indescribably beautiful. There was a sea of flowers in full bloom. At the end of it was a straw hut. It was a place that could be called a fairyland. But because of the species of the sea of flowers, it became a bone-chilling sight. Poppy. The raw material for all drugs. When he walked in, Scorpion was still smiling. Don't smell too much, the pollen here is too strong. You'll get addicted if you smell too much. Prince's fingers were stiff because the smell was too strong. It was so strong that he felt uneasy from the bottom of his heart. Chin-Mo placed his hand on the edge of the car window. His hair was blown by the wind. He seemed to be enjoying it. Is that so? It should be very comfortable to sleep in such a place. Mr. Roang has the same idea as our king. Scorpion seemed to be surprised that the other party would say something like that, but on second thought, most vicious and merciless people wouldn't care if the things around them would harm others. After all, in their eyes, profit was the most important thing. Scorpion thought of this and smiled. Only then would he be worthy of being their partner. However, Scorpion did not know. From the moment they approached the sea of flowers, Prince, Magician, and the rest subconsciously held their breaths to a certain extent. He quietly held his breath. Chapter 1252. Scorpion drove the off-road vehicle into a courtyard not far from the sea of flowers. He stopped the car. On the other side, a row of mercenaries stood in front of them. They had tattoos on their faces and they held guns in their hands. Their expressions were fierce. This was probably a characteristic of this place. The perennial sunlight made their skin tanned and they looked like outlaws. Only the person in the middle was different. That was Fan Jia. But today, she didn't reveal her face. Instead, she wore a cloak and stood there, hiding her appearance. The other person was wearing a suit and looked to be in his 50s. He held a walking stick in his hand and looked over as though he had been waiting for Chin-Mo. When Prince saw that person, he clenched his fists instinctively. Magician and the others were the same. Only Chin-Mo's gaze was calm. He didn't look at that person. Instead, he glanced over and paused on a man in a white coat. This is our king. Scorpion introduced. King, this is Boss Roang. The man with the walking stick reached his hand out. Hello. Chin-Mo lifted the corner of his lips. No one knew what he was thinking. His gaze deepened. I've heard a lot about you. Come, please. The man reached out and led Chin-Mo into the house. The moment he entered the room, Chin-Mo could smell the fragrance of poppies. Sir, you really know how to enjoy yourself, Chin-Mo said when he sat down. The man laughed. Boss Roang knows his stuff. I'm used to this fragrance and sleep well at night. The man took out a cigar and passed it to Chin-Mo. Want one? The moment he said that, Prince wanted to clench his fists. Prince wanted to clench his fists instinctively. After all, everyone knew that in a place like this, things like cigarettes couldn't be accepted because no one knew what was inside. But before he could react, Chin-Mo had already taken a puff. Chin-Mo was already smoking a cigar. He tossed one to him and said, "Test it." Prince didn't have time to react as he took the cigar. The man narrowed his eyes. Mr. Roang, what do you mean? Even though I do business in this area, I don't touch such things. Chi Nemo crossed his legs, his aura strong. Sir, what do you mean by giving me this? Doubt my identity? Then can I also suspect Sir's identity? Are you really Kwang? The man paused, as if he hadn't expected him to be so direct. Moreover, this person didn't look like a soldier, nor was he sent by any department. However, the aura of a gangster was very strong. What was he going to say next? That person had no idea what to do. His gaze drifted in a certain direction. At this moment, even Prince could tell that there was something wrong with Kwang. Why did he keep looking at a family doctor? Just as the question popped up in his head, a voice entered his ears. Boss Rong, you have a good eye. The family doctor walked out from inside. He was wearing a white coat and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He looked very gentle, and even had an indescribable elegance. Chapter 1253. This was Kwang. Prince seemed to have understood something, glancing up at the family doctor. At this moment, he was already seated in his seat, facing Chi Nemo. The person in disguise stood up, standing at the side respectfully. In that instant, doctor and magician's hearts were in their throats. Even though their boss had changed drastically in terms of appearance. Even Fan Jia hadn't been able to recognize him. But Kwang wasn't Fan Jia. Other than being scheming, he was also a top criminal psychologist. When such a person was trying to identify others, they would not rely on their appearance to identify them. In this aspect, Chi Nemo was the same. People like them were usually best at observing each other's details. For example, their actions, the way they spoke, even the minute movements when they drank water would be fatal. The reason why Kwang didn't show himself was because he had a plan from the start. He wanted to observe them in the dark. It was a pity that the people on his side weren't able to keep their composure. Kwang glanced up, sweeping a glance at the vicious face in front of him. Then he smiled. Open the cigars, it'll be easier to inspect the goods. Yes. Scorpion reached for a cigar, slicing it with a knife. Other than the tobacco, there was white powder inside. Chi Nemo smiled playfully. No wonder you don't have to worry about being investigated when doing business with Sir. Such packaging is natural. That's normal. Kwang chuckled, raising the teapot and pouring a cup for Chi Nemo. I like Chinese calligraphy the most, but my skills are limited. In the past, I had a student who was good at calligraphy. It's a pity that he didn't follow me, but he made me very interested in Chinese culture, so... Kwang smiled, lifting the teapot to pour a cup for Chi Nemo. Kwang paused. Fan Jia passed him a ballpoint pen. Kwang reached out and broke it open. It was all fine white powder. Prince gritted his teeth as he watched from the side, but he couldn't show any hint of anger. He actually used stationery to transport goods. However, doctor and magician were thinking about something else. Could the student that Kwang was referring to be? In that instant, doctor's heart sank. What did Kwang mean? Had he seen through their boss's identity? Otherwise, why would he deliberately mention his student? His thoughts were disrupted. The military doctor knew that the current situation was very dangerous. He shouldn't follow her train of thought. However, those who studied psychology would usually be more sensitive than ordinary people. His thoughts were like this now. Then the boss would definitely be more complicated. Kwang hadn't confirmed his boss's identity and was just testing him. Boss's next reply was crucial. Not a bad idea. Chi Nemo took the ballpoint pen and sized it up. Seeing this, I thought of a better idea. Instantly, Kwang's sinister gaze lessened. He arched a brow. Oh. What is it? The correction fluid is safer than this. Chi Nemo tossed the pen aside, his aura thickening. Chapter 1254. Watch a movie. How could Kwang be in such a good mood? The military doctor looked at his boss worriedly. But Kwang didn't seem to be asking for anyone's opinion. With a raise of his hand, his men had already changed the setting in the living room. And where they were sitting, they were facing the screen. If they stood up and left now, their previous efforts would be in vain. They already had so much information. As long as they reached a place with a signal, they would be able to send out the exact location. The main force would arrive soon and completely destroy this hell-like place. But Kwang wasn't easy to deal with. Now, what was his purpose in doing this? Doctor couldn't figure it out. That was why he wasn't confident. Kwang sat on the chair and raised his wine glass. I wonder what kind of movies Boss Rong likes to watch. I personally like anti-reconnaissance movies, so I made the decision to choose this one. Boss Rong, don't be in a hurry to leave, such a good show isn't easy to come by. Oh. Is that so? Chi Nemo arched a brow, a nonchalant expression on his face. Sir's introduction does pique my interest. Kwang laughed. You might like it since the main character is a good choice. The more he acted like this, the more suspicious Doctor was. His boss couldn't possibly not know that Kwang didn't come with good intentions. Was he testing him? The last test. Doctor tightened his fists, his thoughts unreadable. Even someone as insensitive as Prince could tell that the movie invitation wasn't simple. He looked at the atmosphere between the two of them. Especially the smile on Kwang's face. No matter how one looked at it, it was as sinister as a venomous snake. Even though he gave off a refined vibe, at the west side, by the shore. A rustling sound could be heard. The patrolling mercenary frowned. He carried his rifle and walked towards the bushes. The moment he stepped in, before he could raise his rifle, a figure flew down from the tree, a needle plunging into his neck. It was a fatal blow. The mercenary opened his mouth, looking at the youngster on the ground. His breathing stopped abruptly. Bo Jio pulled him to the shore. Under the layers of banana leaves, a car door was revealed. Her movements were very fast. She took off the person's clothes and put them back on in less than a minute. The network has been completely blocked. I can't contact the outside world, and the outside world can't contact us either. I won't be able to lock onto Master's location, so when Master moves, you must be careful. Little Black will wait for you to come back. Bo Jio didn't waste her breath. She reached out and patted Little Blackie's car door. Then she moved the banana leaves back. When she turned around again, she had already changed her appearance. She was wearing a mercenary uniform, and her face was covered with a mask. In order to make the effect more realistic, she even got a one-time tattoo at the corner of her eye. Other than the gun in her hand and the 4 syringes in her pocket, she had no other weapons. But that was all they could do, because they wanted to sneak in and destroy the signal tower. Therefore, they had to travel light and not bring anything. Chapter 1255. Bo Jio knew she was at the periphery, she had to head in. Bo Jio lifted her head, glancing towards the signal jamming tower 3 kilometers away. However, in the next second, his figure paused for a moment. There were poppies everywhere, swaying along with the wind. It was beautiful, but it gave off a strong sense of danger. After all, it was hard to concentrate if one smelled too much of the pollen. Since the network signal couldn't be used, the laptop was useless. Of course, it wasn't certain. There were still loopholes in the network. Bo Jio reached for the communication cable and the black earpiece she had taken from the mercenary. Her eyes dimmed. But in a place with a signal jamming tower, hacking into the network would be easily discovered. This was what she had done. Of course, she wouldn't fall into such a trap. Based on the time, the Almighty should have met up with Kwang. If they found out that someone had infiltrated the group, the Almighty's disguise would be exposed. Bojo tilted her head. Besides, there were many ways to stop the signal jamming tower. Hacking wasn't the only way. She had to shut down the signal jamming tower without exposing the Almighty's identity. That way, the investigation team would have enough time to lock onto the exact location. Bojo believed the Almighty had other plans in mind. That was why she was sure there would be an investigation team not far from here. They should have stopped at the place where they couldn't find the Almighty. Even though she was worried, she couldn't search recklessly because the moment she did, the entire mission would be in vain. Kwang would take the chance to escape, just like the previous time. Hence, she couldn't give Kwang another chance. She had to confirm the location before closing in quietly. That way, Kwang would be caught off guard. You must be thinking the same thing. Brother Mo. Bojo glanced up, plugging her earpiece. Her slender figure was about to move when a voice came from behind her. A voice came from behind. Hey, you, who are you in charge of? Why are you here? Bojo turned with her gun, speaking in the local language. I'm here to relieve myself, my head hurts from looking at those farmers. Don't be too relaxed, King has instructed us not to make any mistakes today. That person glanced at Bojo but didn't say much. He grabbed his gun and went somewhere else. After all, he had never imagined that someone would disguise as one of them and infiltrate their ranks. In addition, Kwang had locked up all the spies and suspected spies yesterday. That meant that there was nothing wrong with the rest. Therefore, that person's guard wasn't very high. What's more, they were inspecting the surface of the water within a 50-kilometer radius. Since the alarm didn't go off, it was even less likely that someone would sneak in. After all, there wasn't even a ship in sight. However, who knew? Bojo didn't walk on the surface but under the water. Bojo's gaze deepened as she reached out to pull down the towel. She lifted her legs and walked behind him. Bojo wouldn't make a move. Because of her voice in my ear. Number 7, what happened to number 7? Speak. I just went to the toilet. Next time when you go to the toilet, keep the communication line open. What's the situation on your side? Everything is normal. Bojo pushed the syringe back into her pocket. Every mercenary here had a Bluetooth earpiece. If one of the Bluetooth earpieces didn't receive a reply, the main communication room would be alerted. Hence, unless it was absolutely necessary, she wouldn't make a move to get rid of him. This way, it would increase the difficulty of her infiltration. It was impossible for there to be no one guarding the signal shielding tower's engine room. It seemed like she could only make use of the time difference. She had to find out how often they would question her. Once she reached the engine room, she would definitely hurt someone. Only by controlling the engine room would she be able to prevent the signal shielding tower from detection even if it was shut down. Hence, the timing of her attack was crucial. Bojo tilted her head, a pair of dark eyes glistening. Her guess was right. Perhaps it was because he knew a person too well that he could even guess the other party's thoughts. Chi Namo had chosen this method to get close to Kwang because he wanted to drag him out. While they were discussing business, the troops would be able to accurately lock onto Kwang's location and the largest drug production base. In order to rescue all the hostages safely, they had to get close to him when he least expected it. If Kwang noticed the commotion, those ordinary tourists would lose their lives here. And that school at the border, this was the reason why Chi Namo didn't stand up even though he knew the movie was going to be an unfavorable test for him. He sat on the chair, looked at the screen, and held the teacup with his fingers. Because the knife wound on his face was still there, he looked a little fierce. His temperament as a big boss hadn't changed at all. Kwang held the remote control, pushing his spectacles before pressing the play button. It was not a movie. Instead, it was a video recorded by the school's surveillance system. Chin Mo leaned back. I don't seem to have the same taste as you. I'm not interested in artistic films with school themes. With that, he tilted his head. How's the inspection? Prince knew that it was time for him to regain his composure. It's all right, it's all good stuff. Brother, are we really going to stay here to watch a movie? It's so boring. If you're bored, go find something to do. Don't bother me in, sir, Chin Mo said calmly. Kawang smiled. I'll bring second young Master Rong out to play. I want you to take a look at this movie. Boss Rong, don't misunderstand, this isn't an artistic film. You'll understand when you continue watching. It's something interesting that happened when I was playing outside. The moment he finished his sentence, a fat girl was suddenly pushed against the wall in the video. Even though there was no sound, everyone's expression could be seen in the video. They crossed their arms, as though they were interrogating. But it wasn't a friendly way of questioning. He raised his hand and poked the fat girl's shoulder. In that instant, the atmosphere in the room seemed to have changed. Was this school violence? Prince tried his best not to let anyone see his expression. But what exactly was going on with this video? Those people were obviously wearing their country's middle school uniform. Was this a local school? Which one? It wasn't that Prince hadn't gone to school before. When he was in school, he would occasionally see girls huddled together and neglected one of them. But it wasn't like this. This was already, before Prince could think of anything. Chapter 1256. The fat girl in the video dashed out. He thought that was the end of the matter. Unexpectedly, the video was pulled to the classroom. On the screen, the teacher led a transfer student in. That transfer student was actually Little Black. Prince tried his best to control his expression, but in that instant, his hands still tightened around the handle of the chair. What was going on? Did Little Black go on a mission and his disguise was exposed? Prince tightened his grip. He wanted to turn his head to look at his boss. At this moment, Kawang's attention was focused on Boss Rong's face. He didn't notice anyone else. Chin Mo crossed his legs, still in the same position, supporting his chin. He didn't seem interested in the video, only glancing at it occasionally. Even Bojo's appearance didn't pique his interest. But in that instant, no one could see the throbbing in his chest. Kawang raised his hand, raising his wine glass. Seems like Boss Rong is bored. It's all right. Chin Mo touched it casually. I'm more concerned about the business. Kawang smiled. Me too, but since the show has started, let's watch it till the end. Chin Mo didn't object, seemingly indifferent. But when he looked at the video again, he felt as if his heart was being squeezed. Why was she there and not at the military base? Chin Mo swirled his wine glass, as though that was the only way to suppress his uneasiness. Kawang spoke again, his tone filled with regret. All the students in this school were supposed to be my hostages, but this fellow ruined it. Boss Rong probably didn't know that this high school student isn't simple at all. It's a pity that her opponent is me. Chin Mo raised his hand, drinking a mouthful of wine, the ruthlessness of a gangster. That's interesting. Indeed. Kawang retracted his gaze, glancing in Fan Jia's direction. The question in his eyes was obvious. Fan Jia nodded. Kawang lowered his head with a smile, his eyes filled with danger. Up until now, there hadn't been any flaws. He had suspected that Chin Mo was the one in charge of the business. President Rong did look like someone from the underworld. Even his small habits didn't seem like something Chin Mo would do. In his memory, that young man was always arrogant, and when he looked at him, there was even a trace of boredom in his eyes. It was the most unpleasant experience he had ever had as a professor. All the students in the university looked at him with eyes full of worship. However, the successor that he had chosen was looking at him with that kind of gaze. In fact, it was completely incompatible with his philosophy. They were both people who understood human nature the most, just like him. Not only did they refuse to cooperate with him, but they even put him in jail. Ordinary people were meant to be used and dominated. It was time for Qin Mo to understand this logic. Yes, Koang didn't really want Qin Mo to die. Rather than letting him die, he would rather have him become his subordinate. That was what he wanted to see the most. As long as he could successfully activate the hypnosis, Qin Mo would become his best weapon against the military. So he had to figure it out. After all, Boss Rong was here to do business. Chapter 1257. At this moment, outside the wooden hut, in the middle of the sea of flowers, it wasn't easy to grow the poppies well. The mercenaries would always patrol the area so that the farmers wouldn't dare to have any ulterior motives. Similarly, this area became the most heavily guarded area. Bo Jiu carried her gun and walked past one of the farmers. Her actions were fierce. No one suspected her even when she was near the engine room. But in order to enter the engine room, she had to be able to match the slogan. Bo Jiu walked back and forth. She looked like she was patrolling the perimeter, but in reality, she was listening to the movements there. 3 batches of people had entered the engine room. It was just that these 3 groups of people all had different slogans. Even with her strong memory, it was hard for her to enter such a defense mechanism. Just as Bo Jiu narrowed her eyes, the 4th batch walked over. Bo Jiu arched a brow. She held a cigarette in her right hand and placed her left hand on the shoulder of one of them. "Brother, do you have a lighter?" "Of course." The person swept her a glance. "But why do you look so unfamiliar? When did you come? Are you in charge of the engine room?" Bo Jiu watched his gaze and noticed the suspicion in it. She smiled faintly. "I haven't been here for long. That's why I haven't seen you before." The person lit his lighter and moved it in front of her. Bo Jiu lit the cigarette but didn't continue to follow him. Instead, she waved her hand. "Thanks. It's okay." The person's suspicions were dispelled when he saw that she wasn't moving forward. He walked towards the engine room. Bo Jiu held the cigarette in her mouth. Her patrolling posture was natural, as though she had indeed been borrowing a lighter. However, only she knew that if she had continued, her identity would have been exposed. Breaking through the defense of the engine room was harder than she had imagined. It seemed like this time, she would have to be more patient and observe. Bo Jiu glanced up and puffed out a string of smoke. She watched the setting sun and listened to the slogan of the 7th batch. A smile appeared on her lips. As expected, after the 3rd slogan, another round. She walked towards the engine room. As the 8th batch, she was stopped by the guards. They glanced at Bo Jiu before replying, "Slogan." Bo Jiu searched through her memories and recited the slogan unhurriedly. The guards looked at each other and stood to the side. Bo Jiu knew her slogan was right. She held the gun in one hand and walked in. The computer room was huge. Once she entered, she could see the security cameras in the corridor. There were a total of 6 of them, and every single one of them was an obstacle to her movements. Therefore, she had to change her identity so that she could come into contact with the mainframe without using force. Yes, there was a change in her plan. After she saw so many cameras made, she wasn't going to destroy the tower again. Because there was another way that was safer. Using the computers here to share IP addresses would not be blocked by the signal tower. The shielding equipment was like a protective shield that perfectly covered the area, making it impossible for anyone to find it quickly. But if it was their own network and equipment, it definitely wasn't blocked. Otherwise, how could they communicate normally? Bojo noticed that none of them had a phone. Even the mercenaries didn't have any. Not to mention the gardeners. The only thing that could silently share the address were the 5 computers in the computer room. Bojo glanced sideways at the technician who was making adjustments behind the glass. When one of them left, Bojo waited for him to leave. She followed after him. This scene wasn't wrong even under the surveillance cameras. After all, Bojo looked like she was patrolling. Bojo didn't take action immediately. Instead, she waited until the person entered the toilet. When he wasn't paying attention, she raised her hand and knocked him out. Then she dragged him into one of the compartments. Bojo scrutinized the person's state. She glanced over and reached out to tear his collar. His hair fell down and his back arched. She tugged at his shirt handsomely. With his messy hair, she put on his shirt. When she came out again, she had changed her clothes. She wasn't the same as before. She wore a pair of black-rimmed spectacles and dipped her hair in water, making it look a little oily. She wore a jacket, and when she walked, her posture changed. Her back was hunched, the perfect image of a technical otaku, even a little dispirited. This meant that from the back, no one would know that she had changed into a different person. It was a perfect disguise. However, just as Bojo was about to leave, she noticed a little boy looking at her while washing his hands. The boy was about 11 or 12 years old. His skin was tan due to the intense daily life. Due to the poor environment, he looked very skinny. Especially his arms, he gave off a weak and small vibe. He didn't look dangerous standing there because there was nothing in his eyes. It was pure black. The moment Bojo walked past him, the boy reached into his pocket in the mirror. It was an action of pulling out a gun. He had already pulled out his gun, the muzzle pointed at her back. Swoosh! The boy didn't seem to expect the other party to be on guard against him. Before he could open fire, his throat was pierced by the military knife that appeared. So much so that he couldn't even say a word. He just widened his eyes and leaned back. Bojo reached out and caught him. She locked the boy, whose body was gradually turning cold, together with the technician from before. At the start, Bojo didn't think about guarding against a child. Even if he were to calculate the time, it was very likely that he would have heard something. But as she approached the boy, a familiar image seemed to spill out of her mind. It was mentioned in the Bible. When your soul left your body, you would remember many things in your life. Those things would be like a movie replayed in your mind. But there were some memories that you would lose. For example, how you left your body. Or, things that you purposely wanted to blur out. That was why there was a saying, forget about your life so that you can rest in peace. But in that instant, there was a replay. Why did she die? It was because of that moment of softness. It was after she had settled a case, walking on the bustling streets of Tokyo. There was a cheerful Christmas atmosphere everywhere. An 11-year-old girl's balloon floated onto a tree. She tugged at her sleeve, asking if she could help her take the balloon down. At that time, Bojo didn't realize that the girl had taken out a gun when she turned around. It was very similar to the scene now. Kwang loved to nurture demons. Bojo wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Because of what she had learned from the Almighty, it was enough for her to observe the danger the child posed. Young children were the scariest when they hurt others. A child that could survive in such a place wasn't simple. Besides, Kwang was here. Bojo raised her hand, wiping the blood off her face. She knew that if it had been someone else, like Prince, he wouldn't have been so ruthless. But she was different, her heart had long turned black. But sometimes, she would come back empty-handed. Bojo adjusted her jacket. When she walked out of the washroom, her back was hunched, befitting her current identity. There weren't any surveillance cameras in the washroom. Hence, the surveillance room didn't notice anything amiss. Even when Fan Jia had taken a glance at the surveillance cameras, she hadn't been able to see through her disguise. But she wasn't Kawang, nor was she Qin Mo. When the images from different locations appeared, she could only tell that something was wrong, like this kind of disguise. Unless she had specially looked for it, it would be hard for anyone to notice anything amiss with just a glance. Besides, Bojo hadn't chosen anyone randomly. After careful observation, she had chosen someone with a figure that was the closest to her. Every technician was focused on their computer screen. Hence, when Bojo sat down, the other four hadn't snapped back to their senses. But Bojo couldn't be too obvious. Because there were surveillance cameras here as well, at this moment, inside the wooden hut. The video showed a person struggling in the water. It seemed to be a prank in the school. Prince was still guessing. But the military doctor had already sensed something was amiss. This wasn't a scene from the surveillance cameras. Why had Kawang planted such a scene in the surveillance cameras? Wait a minute. Water. Every time their boss's mood fluctuated, it was related to water. Even they weren't sure what had happened that day. But the person who had planted the hypnosis knew. The military doctor, who was inspecting the other items, wanted to speak but Qin Mo interrupted him. How's the purity? It's very pure, the military doctor replied. Qin Mo chuckled, as though nothing had happened. He used his wine glass to touch Kawang's. Let's have a pleasant cooperation. Let's have a pleasant cooperation. Kawang's gaze dimmed. He seemed to be sizing up the person in front of him. At this moment, the video changed again. It was the scene where the youngster had gone to the infirmary to look for Kawang, who had disguised himself as the school doctor. The scene appeared clearly in front of everyone. In the video, Kawang was very knowledgeable. He had asked the youngster to test the thermometer politely. He seemed to have said something. The youngster didn't seem to be on guard. Then Kawang glanced at the thermometer that the youngster had tested. He stood up and walked towards the water heater. No one knew what medicine he had added. However, when he stood up, even the military advisor had a premonition that once the young man drank this thing, he would definitely be in danger. At that moment, Kawang had already sensed something was wrong with the youngster. Chapter 1258. The military doctor turned towards Qin Mo instinctively when he saw the scene in the video. Recruit number 10 held a special meaning to his boss. The military doctor remembered clearly how many rules his boss had broken in the military just to get closer to the recruit. He had never imagined that he would see such a smile on his boss's face. It was pure and without any impurities. It was because he had thought of that person. But now, the recruit wasn't able to escape. In the video, Kawang had already turned over, passing the medicine to the youngster. The youngster took it. At this moment, the video stopped. Prince's eyes were red but he couldn't lift his head to show his abnormality. Kawang was in a good mood, pouring himself another glass of wine. Boss Rong, can you guess how I dealt with him in the end? Qin Mo sat there, feeling a chill in his heart. After a certain degree of pain, he would no longer feel it. It was as though a part of his soul had been pulled out. He lifted the corner of his lips. Sir, I really can't guess your methods. After all, in my place, you would just break your limbs. That would be too bloody for a weak doctor like me. I prefer a cleaner method. Kawang swirled his wine glass. Wasn't there a pond in the video? It's in the gymnasium near the school. I tied 2 bricks to his legs and threw him into the water. When he was in the water, he woke up but he couldn't come up after a long time. He sank to the bottom of the water. Chin Mo listened to the voice beside his ear. The results told him not to believe Kwang's words. But his brain was indeed numb, his body sinking. He didn't dare to think too much because the moment he did, the scene that Kwang had described would appear in his mind. He had dreamed of it countless times but he didn't want to believe it. The blurry figure was sinking slowly in the water. No matter how he stretched out his hands, he couldn't pull her up. She was too far away, he didn't even have the chance to see her for the last time. "Boss, the inspection is done." When the military doctor walked over, he accidentally knocked over the teacup on the table. Gotcha! He was shocked as if he had done something wrong. "Boss, I deserve to die." Chin Mo's hand turned cold. His fingertips moved, his gaze changing slightly. "You broke Mr. Ka's teacup, not mine." Hearing this, the military doctor turned around and was about to apologize. Kwang raised his hand, a gentle smile on his face. "It's just a cup. Boss Rong will come often in the future, this is just a small matter." When Scorpion heard his boss say this, he knew that there was no problem with this deal. The other party's identity had passed his boss inspection. It was indeed so. Kwang glanced at Boss Rong who was still focused on the transaction. Basically, he denied some of his guesses. The hypnosis had been activated. But this person didn't react. Unless the person in the video wasn't important to him, or he wasn't Chin Mo. Kwang was leaning towards the second option. After all, that youngster was their trump card against Chin Mo. It was impossible for him not to be important. Although it was a little regretful that he didn't get to see what he wanted to see. However, the other aspects were not bad. For example, there was nothing wrong with this group of people. They could work together now. Kwang glanced up at Fan Jia. Understanding, Fan Jia walked to the front to check the money. "Wang, they only brought half of the deposit." "Oh," Kwang replied, turning towards the person beside him. "Boss Rong, what do you mean?" "Sir, you are so guarded against others. I have to hold back." Chin Mo glanced up. "You asked us to come to the designated location but you didn't even let us know the address. Sir, you should be aware that the scariest thing in the underworld is a scam. I'm afraid I might encounter such an incident at night. Moreover, Boss Rong's business has always been like this. The deposit will only be paid after the deal is settled." What he said made sense. Kwang knew that the longer one stayed in the underworld, the more cautious he was. After all, there would be times when he failed miserably. Chin Mo stood up, grabbing his jacket. "Since there are no problems with the goods, we can inform the consultant and get him to transfer the other portion of the deposit into your account." Prince spoke up at the right time. "Brother, don't worry. I can't get through. I tried but there isn't any signal here. I'm sorry." Kwang smiled. "Second young master must not be used to it. I have no choice, this place is only this big and it's just a business to maintain my livelihood. However, China keeps chasing after me. In order to defend myself, I have to resort to such means." With that, Kwang paused. "Fan Jia, pass your phone to Boss Rong." "Yes." Fan Jia reached out, passing her phone over. Since he wasn't the person, there wasn't much to see. Chin Mo didn't move. Prince didn't know what was wrong with his boss but he knew he had to pick up the phone. They had put in so much effort just for this. He reached out to take the phone, placing it in Chin Mo's palm. "Brother, you should contact the family. The consultant won't listen to me." Chin Mo's gaze was deep. Prince couldn't read his emotions but there was an indescribable danger in his eyes. contact the family, Qin Mo replied, dialing a string of numbers. Ring ring ring. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any phones in such an important meeting. But the phone that rang was the one everyone hoped would light up. According to the original plan, Qin Mo would use this number to contact the higher-ups. An unknown number was displayed on the screen. General Qin was in his military uniform. He lifted his finger and pressed the answer button. Hello, is this the consultant? He turned on the hands-free button. Everyone in the conference room was quiet. They were giving General Qin time to communicate with them. At the same time, someone hurriedly made a hand gesture, indicating for them to locate the source of the call. General Qin replied in a low voice, "It's me." His voice seemed to wake Qin Mo up. "There's no problem with the goods, you can transfer the money. What's the account number?" Everyone knew that these weren't the most important questions. The most important thing was to confirm the exact location of the operation team through the duration of the call. After all, it usually took a long time to read out the account number. This was Qin Mo's plan from the start. It was to prevent the other party from cutting off all their communication devices, preventing them from tracking their location. Now, they finally saw a glimmer of hope. But no one expected that the glimmer of hope would disappear as quickly as it came. Just as Qin Mo read out the two numbers, the signal came from the other side. It was the sound of the phone being hung up. Beep, beep, beep. Damn it. The technical soldier outside the meeting room threw his earpiece away, his hands clenched into fists. Just a little more, and we would have been able to locate the exact location of the call. The leader in the meeting room glanced over. Everyone was concerned about the outcome. How is it? The technical soldier shook his head. The person at the top said, "Continue to lock on." The technical soldier wanted to continue locking onto the target, but he knew very well that it was impossible to lock onto the target without the signal. The other party didn't just hang up, he removed the communication card. Indeed. Kawang reached for the phone when Qin Mo said the second number, smiling. "Let Fan Jia send the account number." With that, he tossed the phone behind him. Fan Jia caught the phone and removed the communication card in it. Hunter and Magician clenched their fists when they saw this. They weren't sure if the time was enough for the troops to locate their exact location. However, this wasn't the only problem Dr. Qin was worried about. The most important thing was Boss. Perhaps Boss didn't realize it himself, but the light in his eyes had started to change. Boss. What was he thinking? Qin Mo wasn't thinking about anything. Images flashed through his mind. Every scene was related to the youngster. In the end, there was the surging water and the wrist he couldn't grab in time. At this moment, the technical soldier outside the meeting room was still trying his best. Just as he was about to tell General Qin that he couldn't locate young master's location, suddenly, a red dot lit up on his local network. It was here. This was the address that young master had just called from. Wait a minute. This was signal transmission. Someone had hacked into the other party's network? How was that possible? Even though he couldn't believe it, it was indeed the address. The technical soldier didn't hesitate. With the red dot's guidance, it was too easy to locate them. In less than a minute, the technical soldier shouted, "General, it's done. The coordinates are 35 degrees north latitude, 47 degrees south latitude." The technical soldier didn't know that he wasn't the only one with a red dot. Everyone who was tracking Qin Mo and young Master Tang had the same result. Fatty and young Master Tang had the same result. In just a short moment, the sea, land, and air forces rushed towards the same direction at the fastest speed. In the computer room on the island, Bojo was still sitting in her seat, a pair of spectacles on her face. On the computer screen, she seemed to be adjusting the local surveillance system. But in reality, under the hidden dialog box, there was a continuous stream of code. She didn't hack into the network. Instead, she opened up the computer room's IP to maximize the sharing. The computer room's IP was shared. But it could only be shared locally. Now, she had opened up the network and cracked the password. Then, he would create a fake protective cover to stabilize the balance of the regional network. This way, he would be able to transmit the address without anyone noticing. The signal jamming tower was still there. Phones from the outside world couldn't be used here. But there was one thing. They thought it was the safest. In reality, they didn't know that their location had been leaked. Kwang didn't come to the computer room today because he had a business meeting. But very quickly, he sent Fan Jia over. At this moment, Bojo was already repairing the system and erasing the traces, restoring the IP to its original state. Then, she stood up, pushed the glasses on her face, and walked towards the bathroom. When she came out again, she was dressed as a mercenary, holding a rifle in one hand. Bojo hadn't expected to meet Fan Jia face to face. Fortunately, her face was black and she had grown a layer of beard. Bojo didn't dodge. Instead, she walked towards Fan Jia as though she was patrolling. Both of them brushed past each other. Suddenly, Fan Jia glanced in Bojo's direction, narrowing her eyes. Wait a minute. Bojo paused, turning back slowly. She was wondering if her injection was faster or the big guy beside Fan Jia's rifle. Time seemed to have slowed down, stretched out. Fan Jia glanced at Bojo's face, asking, "Did you see anyone suspicious?" "No." Bojo released the injection in her pocket. This way, she looked more natural, the tattoo at the corner of her eyes more obvious. Fan Jia had more important things to do, she wasn't going to waste her time on a mercenary. She turned, reaching out to push the glass door open. Bojo stood outside, her voice faintly audible. "Is there anything amiss?" "No." "Where's the person sitting on the second computer?" "She's here, she probably went to the washroom." Fan Jia frowned, turning on the computer on the second computer instinctively. Her first reaction was to check if there were any signs of an attack on the regional network, to check if there were any problems with the firewall. She also checked the computer for any abnormalities. After confirming there were no problems, she stood up, her expression unhappy. In the future, no one is allowed to go out alone, not even to the washroom, understand? Yes. After Fan Jia heard the answer she wanted, she tested the shielding equipment. It was working normally. At this moment, Fan Jia didn't know. What exactly had she missed out? If Kwang had been here, he might have been able to sort out the problem quickly. No matter how smart Fan Jia was, she wouldn't have guessed that the computer room seemed normal, but in reality, it had been attacked. And the person who had attacked it. Bojo walked out of the computer room. She reached out, pulling the mask up to her nose. It was probably because the mercenary's gait exuded a sense of wildness. He held the gun with one hand, his gaze filled with murderous intent. Hence, she didn't suspect his identity. Bojo walked forward, one hand in her pocket, passing through the flower railings. Her next target was the wooden hut by the river. Bojo tilted her handsome face. Behind the veil, she couldn't help but smile. "Brother Imo, I'll see you soon." Chapter 1259. But at that moment, Bojo wasn't aware of what Chin Imo was going through. The fastest reinforcements would need at least 10 minutes to get here. 10 minutes. Chin Imo suppressed the images countless times, but the emptiness in his chest was unbearable. No one noticed that his eyes had darkened. Even Kwang's attention was on Fan Jia. How is it? Master, don't worry, the engine room is functioning normally. That's good. Kwang smiled, continuing to lead them towards the lake. The poppies there were in full bloom and the latest product was produced. It was a type of candy that was even more addictive than ecstasy. Or rather, it was disguised as a candy. Prince's eyelids twitched when he saw this. Kwang seemed to enjoy his shock, tearing one of the candies apart. This is the perfect disguise, it will be easier to enter the country. The stationery is still a risk, but these fake candies are different. Besides, in the Chinese market, these are the most popular candies in the nightclubs. However, the checks are too strict and it isn't easy for some people to sell them. It would be best if the Rong family has the channels. At this moment, Prince felt extremely fortunate that they had contacted Kwang before the drug dealers. He was really vicious. In his mind, there wasn't anything he should or shouldn't do. What would happen if these things entered the supermarket by mistake? Children would definitely eat them. Prince couldn't imagine such a scene. Was Kwang trying to use drugs to control everyone's lives? Why? Second young master doesn't seem to like such packaging. Kwang was observant, his eyes dark as he watched Prince's expression. In that instant, almost everyone sensed a message. There was a flaw on their side. Kwang was suspicious. At the same time, Fan Jia, who had hung up, glanced at the number 2 camera. After waiting for a full 3 minutes, she suddenly asked, "When did he go to the toilet?" "It's been about 15 minutes. The technician beside her frowned. "What happened? Why did he take so long?" Fan Jia wasn't stupid, her instincts told her that something must have happened. He turned around and strode in the direction of the bathroom. The mercenaries were the first to enter. When they reached the last cubicle, they turned their heads and said, "There's someone inside." Fan Jia narrowed her eyes. "Kick it open." Yes. The mercenaries were still very destructive. With one kick, the wooden door was kicked open with a bang. There were indeed people inside. However, it was completely different from what they had imagined. A technician who had been knocked unconscious and a boy who had been stabbed in the head with a syringe. It was easy to imagine what this signified. Fan Jia didn't hesitate, her first reaction was to call Kwang. "Hey!" Kwang's gaze was still on Prince's face, but it was hard to tell. Fan Jia's voice was anxious. "Master, the engine room has been tampered with. There's something wrong with the business owner's identity." Kwang clenched his fists when he heard this. At that moment, no one could tell. He turned, his smile even gentler. Dressed in a white coat, he exuded a murderous aura. "I already know, it's not a big problem. I'll come over after the arrangements are made. I still have to discuss the new product with Boss Rong." Fan Jia had been by Kwang's side for a long time. The moment she heard his words, she understood what he meant. The other party was still around. Her master knew about it, but he pretended to be oblivious. He wanted to lead them to a dead end and destroy them all. These people weren't afraid of death. They came in waves. They were smarter than before. So what? All of them would die here. Fan Jia hated the fact that she hadn't caught the youngster in the video. If she had, she would have fed her drugs and turned her into a living hell. It was better than letting her disappear. On the other side, Kwang had already hung up. He glanced up at the group. Everyone must be hungry after watching for so long. "Why don't we eat while looking at the new product, Scorpion?" "Yes." Scorpion didn't know what had happened. Kwang smiled. "Bring out the feast we usually prepare for our VIPs. Let Boss Rong and the rest have a good taste." Scorpion paused, instantly understanding the meaning behind those words. His eyes turned dangerous as he glanced at Prince and the others, lowering his head and replying, "Yes." When he turned around again, his expression had changed. He made a throat-slitting gesture at the mercenaries who were looking at him. Kawang continued to lead them forward. Just as Prince and the rest were about to take a step forward, suddenly, their boss lowered the hand holding the cigarette, tapping the side of his thigh lightly. Once, twice, thrice. It was fast and rhythmic. It was a common code used during World War II. There were only 5 words in the translation. Kawang is going to attack. Be it hunter or wolf, both of them instinctively looked for their weapons in that instant. Kawang continued, "I admire Boss Rong's courage, but it's a pity, a pity." With that, he turned, raising his hand to shoot. Unexpectedly, the person who was originally standing next to him was 1 step faster than him. His figure flashed, and his leg kicked the gun in his hand away. Kawang's eyes darkened. The mercenaries opened fire in unison. However, these people seemed to be prepared in advance. They slid into the flower field and used the harvester to block their bodies. Prince leaned against the wheel, not having the chance to catch his breath. Boss's voice rang out. "Jacket." Prince snapped back to his senses, removing his jacket and tossing it over. Chi Nemo and Wolf stood at the same position, pulling the pendants down. The 2 of them started working. In less than 20 seconds, 2 small guns were produced. Prince was wearing bullets on his wrist. There weren't many, only 10 bullets. They were loaded into the 2 guns. When they had entered, they had gone through a strict inspection. Scorpion was so thorough that he even checked their ears. He hadn't expected them to have guns. "Charge, they don't have any weapons." Scorpion lifted the gun in his hand. But the moment he finished speaking, there was a loud bang. The mercenary closest to the harvester fell to the ground, his head blown off. "They have a sniper." The mercenaries exchanged glances, wanting to scatter. But a second gunshot rang in the air. Another bullet pierced through his chest. Scorpion couldn't figure out where they had gotten their weapons from. Until he saw the black leather jacket. He kicked the wooden bucket beside him. It was filled with poppies. How dare they trick him so brazenly? That second young master didn't like this kind of upstart clothing that was full of metal accessories. Instead, he liked to assemble those accessories together to form a gun. Scorpion hadn't thought of this. Firstly, Prince's image was too deep. Secondly, it was hard to guess Almighty Qin's tricks. That was why Scorpion had made a mistake in his work. He was able to react better. Everything that the other party had done was planned. Even disguising as someone was one of them. Very quickly, Scorpion realized that they weren't the same as the people they had met previously. "Ah!" Scorpion screamed, aiming his gun at the same spot. "Who exactly are you?" Qin Mo's gaze darkened. After the bullet brushed past his ear, he seemed to have woken up again. He lifted his head and said, "Chinese soldiers." The words were like blood that flowed into his heart. This made Prince stand up abruptly. He caught the gun that Wolf threw over and fired at the mercenary on the right who was trying to approach him. 3 people had already fallen on this side, but the people on the other side were completely unharmed. Kawang watched the scene with a dark expression. "Set up the sniper cannon." "Yes." Scorpion's eyes flashed. He pushed the person beside him away and placed the long-barrel sniper cannon on his shoulder. A shot like that. As long as it hit the harvester. It wouldn't just be the machine that would explode, the people behind would be blown away as well. But right at this moment. Suddenly, a loud buzzing sound came from the sky. In that instant, everyone on the ground looked up at the sky. 1, 2, 3, 4. A total of 18 military fighter jets with the red flag on them rushed out of the spreading clouds, appearing in front of them with an unstoppable aura. This time, there was no warning. With the evidence that Qin Mo and his team had gathered, it was enough for them to send their troops across the border. But there was one point. China had to bring Kuang back to decide whether he was dead or alive. If he landed in someone else's hands, no one could be sure if this time would be the same as the previous time. Someone would make use of a deal with the upper class to bring Kuang back. Judging from the events that had happened before, there was a problem with the MT government. That was why Kuang had been so arrogant for so long. The moment he pointed at the military council, it was like a flood. But there wasn't a hint of panic on Kuang's face. They don't dare to move, there are so many bombs buried here. If they throw a bomb, we won't be the only ones dying. Indeed, the military planes couldn't strafe. Scorpion lifted his lips, raising the sniper cannon and firing at the wings in the sky. Bang! One of the military planes suffered damage, losing its balance. Chapter 1260. Kuang's words caused Strategist's heart to skip a beat. He turned back abruptly. Due to his boss's posture, he couldn't see his expression at all. But he felt an inexplicable sense of unease. He couldn't describe the uneasiness he felt. Just his posture was enough to send a chill down Strategist's spine. Qin Mo stood there with a gun in his hand, as though the changes around him didn't affect him at all. But Strategist knew something wasn't right. Boss shouldn't be like this. Kuang must have sensed the problem before him. That was indeed the case. The more he looked at Qin Mo, the wider the smile on Kuang's face. It wasn't easy for us to meet and we have to separate immediately. Actually, I really want to sit down and have a good talk with you about the topic I was talking about. I believe that after today, you will have a different opinion. Kuang glanced at the watch on his wrist. It's about time, Scorpion will stay behind to play with you guys. See you later. With that, he gestured to the mercenaries. Immediately, someone started the speedboat parked on the lake. Everyone on the mission knew they couldn't let Kuang leave this place. Once he entered Country T and was caught, he would be out of China's interrogation range. But the firepower on the ground was too strong and the military planes couldn't open fire due to the bombs buried in the ground. Once they got close, their wings would be shot off. Almost everyone tightened their grip on this point. Qin Mo still stood there, his eyes reflecting Kuang's back view. The white coat of the doctor overlapped with the image in his memory, causing his gaze to darken. Wolf watched as his boss strolled out. He turned, immediately thinking of a way to cover himself. Qin Mo moved quickly, his entire body exuding a cold aura. Just as the mercenary raised his hand to kill him, a card shot out faster than a bullet. A card that was faster than a bullet burst out in an instant and stabbed straight into his forehead. The card was Qin Mo, but the way he killed him was like magic. Before anyone realized it, their skin had already been scratched by the cards. At this moment, Kuang was preparing to board the boat. He turned back and glanced at the figure following them. He seemed to be in a hurry, but surprisingly, he didn't ask anyone to stop Qin Mo. Instead, it seemed like she was purposely making him follow her. She heard someone calling Boss Qin. Kuang narrowed his eyes. Let Scorpion destroy the harvester first, it's annoying for the people behind. Come on, Qin Mo, wait a little longer. You will be my most successful masterpiece. He believed that at that time. You will be willing to call me teacher. Kuang smiled as he stepped onto the boat. The mercenary stood on the shore. His figure was very familiar. He took the earpiece and said, King wants you to get rid of the special forces on the land first. Scorpion smiled and adjusted the aim of the sniper rifle. I'll take care of it now. On the other side, Prince glanced sideways and sensed the other party's intention. He wanted to push Wolf, who was the closest to him, away. The corner of Scorpion's mouth curled deeper and deeper, his killing intent filling the sky. All of you, die. Just as his finger was about to pull the trigger, a voice rang out. Bang! A fierce gunshot rang out from an unknown place. Chapter 1261. D***, there's a sniper. In an instant, all the mercenaries were in chaos. Blood splattered everywhere. Scorpion didn't even know how he died. He was already lying on the ground with his cannon. But that wasn't the end. At the highest point of the flower field, a slender figure was lying on the ground, with a rifle resting on her shoulder. The hair on her forehead fell down, revealing only a pair of eyes. Her breathing was slow, but the speed at which she fired the gun was shockingly fast. She locked onto him accurately. It was a clean shot. Bang! Another gunshot rang out. Before the mercenaries could even react, Shi Yan had already taken out his cannon. The military aircraft in mid-air had already found an opportunity to descend. Prince, who had been prepared to die, widened his eyes. He glanced at his back before glancing up in disbelief. Someone is helping us. Could it be someone from the same industry that Kawang didn't eliminate? That's not possible. Strategist had received the information. According to what he knew, all the spies here had been locked up by Kawang. But how could he explain the two gunshots? Fatty, who had landed with the military aircraft, had had this question when he had received the red dot signal. After hearing the two gunshots, he was even more certain of his suspicions. There was someone else here besides his boss. But who could that person be? Forgive Fatty for his low intellect, he couldn't figure it out. But it was undeniable that the situation had changed because of the sniper's hidden shot. If the first military aircraft could descend, the second one would be able to as well. The mercenaries had started to change their tactics from their frenzied shooting. This was because they knew very well that once these military aircraft were given a chance to land, these Huaxia soldiers would give them a thorough and painful blow. The two gunshots were the ones that had caused this opening. The sky was filled with military green, occupying every spot. Prince managed to snatch a gun that belonged to him. His figure was like a dragon as he weaved through the crowd. His combat skills were finally on full display. When he lifted his lids, he glanced towards the flower field. The figure was gone. Where did it go? Prince was still curious about who had saved them. On the other side, Kawang sensed the change in the situation. His eyes dimmed and his fingers tightened. He wasn't as calm as before. Instead, he was furious. Set sail. Yes. The person in charge of the rudder started the ship. 3 mercenaries stood at the bow and were pushing. Looking at the speedboat cutting through the water. Kawang slowly released his grip. But before the corners of his mouth curled up, 2 poker cards took the lives of 2 of his men. It was Qin Mo. At this time, he had already wiped off the disguise on his face. Dressed in a black windbreaker, he looked like a demon from hell. Coupled with the flames behind him and the poker cards revolving around his palm, he gave off a dangerous aura that could destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. The big mercenary obviously took a step back. The speedboat sped up. Qin Mo stepped on the corpses by the river and leaped onto the front of the boat. Kawang stood at the cabin. When he looked at the hair hanging down his forehead, he smiled deeply. Is it painful? Qin Mo, you are my student. In terms of psychological research, I won't lose to you. So stop struggling. Look at this lake, isn't it similar to the one you saw previously? Speaking of which, you can't protect the person you like because of your responsibilities. do you still remember our lesson? Humans are selfish. If you aren't selfish, you won't be able to protect the person you want to protect. In this world, there will always be people who don't follow the bottom line. Do you want to know how I discovered the identity of your little lover? She was probably influenced by you. She actually wanted to save one of my believers. It's a pity, that believer of mine doesn't care about anything as long as she can be noticed. It wasn't easy to choose her. Don't you people in China pay attention to small things? When I found out that she stood on the side of the plagiarist and didn't care about who was the original author, she even posted a long post to prove how smart she was, I locked onto her as my believer. As expected, as long as you give her a chance to stand in front of everyone, she will do anything, including betraying the person who thought she was bullied and wanted to protect her. That person is you, the one who tried so hard to sneak into the school to deal with me. It's a pity. From a certain perspective, I admire her. For example, the way she struggled to survive in the pond. This was a further hint. If Qin Mo was clear-headed, he would definitely know and eliminate it immediately. But now, Qin Mo wasn't clear-headed. In fact, the moment he saw the youngster in the video take the cup of water, his mental defenses were already starting to crumble. But at that moment, there was a belief that supported him. That belief was to complete the mission. Kawang would probably never understand. To a soldier in China, especially to someone like Qin Mo, what did belief mean? It meant that even if the hypnosis was activated, he wouldn't give up. Kawang could see the change in Qin Mo's emotions. The hand hanging by his side clenched tighter. The happier Kawang was. Now, the boat was a distance away from the riverbank. He believed that no one would be able to catch up to them. Similarly, he believed Qin Mo wouldn't attack him again. As long as he continued to guide this person who had completely lost his mind. Then, he would be able to use his sharpness. Kawang had waited for this day for a long time. He couldn't control his excitement at the thought of being able to use Qin Mo. It was obvious from Kawang's state. He tried hard to control his emotions, wanting to slow down his tone so that he could carry out the hypnosis better. Think about it, are those people worth saving? Other than making you lose the most important person in your life, what else did they bring you? Qin Mo, you can totally change your way of living. You are the chosen one, why did you have to choose such a difficult path? As long as you let go of the unnecessary perseverance in your heart, the person you love won't leave you. I know you want revenge now. Those people who made you lose her, every single one of them is trash. What's wrong with getting rid of these trash? You should kill all of them, isn't that right? Chapter 1262. Her deep voice was like the water in the lake, drowning all of Qin Mo's senses. The speed of her speech, the tone of her voice and the content she was feeding him. Kawang was using a targeted hypnosis. He watched as the tall and straight figure stood in front of him. He paused, reaching out to press down on his head. On the other side, after firing the 2 shots, Bojiu leaped up from the flower field. She realized that Qin Mo had boarded the speedboat. The only way she could catch up to him was to hide her Lamborghini 600 meters away. But it wasn't possible for her to not be discovered. Even when she flew past him. When Prince saw the familiar figure, he couldn't help pausing. Little Black. It's really Little Black. The next second, he saw her clothes and the rifle in her hands. He recalled her previous position. His eyes widened. It's Little Black, the one who helped us just now was Little Black. Doctors saw Bojiu's face, the youngster's face had probably been rubbed against the bushes, her disguise gone. Her cold face looked especially pleasantly surprised at this moment. They hadn't expected it. Bojiu was the one who had been helping them. Fatty was the most shocked among them. He opened his mouth and shouted, "Big Spade." That explained why he had received the red dot's location. It was because of her. She was actually here. Fatty couldn't tell what he was feeling because he couldn't find a second person who would enter the tiger's den alone to save the boss and turn the situation around with his own strength. This reminded him of the days in Supreme Alliance. He had seen her shoulder the heavy burden and lead Supreme Alliance out of the encirclement. But, however, such a person might not be able to return to the esports arena. But even so, she had still appeared here. She could have stayed out of trouble. Both her and their boss. But they had still come to the most dangerous place. Because they had to save these people. Fatty wasn't afraid of anything. He was most afraid of not being able to make it in time. Doctor was the same. Hence, when he saw the youngster's face, his first reaction was to shout towards the lake. "Boss, the most important person to you is still alive." It was useless. The speedboat was already quite far away. Now, they could only vaguely see that they had stopped there. As for what exactly happened, no one knew. Swoosh! Bojo lifted the banana leaf that was blocking the Lamborghini. Voice recognition unlock. The car door opened with a snap. The navigation system began operating. Originally, Little Black wanted to tease its master humorously. "I'm done changing the diving mode, I'll be right back." Entering diving mode. The navigation system fluctuated. "The fuel is not full. Master, please be careful. We might not be able to return." Bojo reached out to block the water goggles. "Ignore it." "Yes." When Little Black heard this, he knew that his master had lost his usual composure. Otherwise, he wouldn't have set off so recklessly without considering the amount of fuel. Not only that. There was also the look on her face when she held the steering wheel and dived into the water. It wasn't like her at all, but it made one's heart ache. Little Black heard her voice. There was a rare sense of urgency. She said, "Brother Mo, wait a little longer. I'll be there soon." Little Black did not understand human emotions. It just knew how to look. If there was a person, he would really like that person too much. His greatest fear would be losing them. On the lake, in the cabin. Kawang took another step forward, his gaze landing on Chin Mo's lifeless eyes. "I have a remote control here. As long as you press the red button, you will be able to eliminate a portion of the people who caused her death. As for the rest, you can take your time to find them." At this moment, Chin Mo seemed to be bewitched, his lifeless eyes looking towards the brightest color. "Come, you are the most qualified person to judge." Kawang was still as refined as ever. After all, the main event was about to begin. As long as he pressed the button, the wooden house not far from the speedboat would be blown away. There were countless bombs buried underneath. The Chinese soldiers who had destroyed his plans and the people who refused to be captured would be buried along with his flower field. Most importantly, the person who would do it was Chin Mo. Just based on this point, he had already won. Yes, from the start, this was Kawang's plan. He didn't care much about his subordinates. Although it would definitely be a little difficult to find some people who were convenient to use. But Chin Mo was enough to exchange for them. With that thought, Kawang's smile deepened. Chin Mo reached out his hand as though he was being commanded. Just as Kawang thought he was going to press the button, there was a swoosh sound. The remote control was thrown into the water. Chin Mo was still standing at his position. The wind from the river blew against his black trench coat, making him look like a vampire about to explode. There was an indescribable evil smile on his lips, as though he was mocking the world with a hint of bloodlust. Kawang's expression changed instantly. Because after looking at Chin Mo, he suddenly remembered an article on psychology. Most people would have a natural sense of submission to their psychological mentor when they triggered a psychological cue. But there was a 0.1% of people who, when their beliefs reached a certain level, wouldn't submit to their psychologist. Instead, they would become more and more. Kwang didn't want to continue thinking. He raised his hand, wanting to shoot Chin Mo. Since he couldn't tame someone, he should be killed right here and now. Chin Mo wouldn't give him the chance. In a flash, the poker card in his hand flew out again. This time, it was even more murderous than before. When the poker card brushed past his wrist, Kwang missed his aim in pain. The bullet flew past his side, hitting the mercenary who wanted to stop Chin Mo. Kwang's eyes widened. He knew how powerful Chin Mo was, but he didn't know where his bottom line was. But this time, he saw it. At the same time, he also saw the true hell. At this moment, Chin Mo didn't have any reservations. Because he didn't have any reservations, there was only one thought left in his mind. Kill. Kill. Kill them all. Especially this person. Many people had said that young Master Chin's hands looked good when he played games and would definitely be more beautiful when he played the piano. But they didn't know that Chin Mo's hands were porcelain white and cold. When he picked up the poker card to kill someone, it could be described as breathtaking. As the prey, Kwang's heart had never raced so fast. In that moment, his eyes were filled with panic. Even the usual gentleness on his face was gone. He pressed down on his hand, wanting to pick up the gun anxiously. Chin Mo walked in front of him. His eyes were as deep as they had been when they first met. But this time, the flickering light was a little dark. You're right, they all deserve to die. But the one who deserves to die the most is you, Professor. Chin Mo smiled nonchalantly. When he smiled, there were still traces of blood under his eyes. He was incomparably handsome. You seem to have always wanted to control me. Professor, didn't the documents you studied tell you that when things reach an extreme, they will go in the opposite direction? With that, the poker card in Chin Mo's hand was already pressed against Kwang's neck. I do have some regrets, Kwang said. As Kwang spoke, a blade appeared in his palm. Without waiting for Chin Mo to defend himself, he stabbed the blade towards him. Chin Mo dodged, his long leg kicking him to the side, sending him crashing into the cabin. Kwang's eyes wavered. He had realized his end. If it had been the Chin Mo of the past, he wouldn't have been in this state. But Kwang laughed lowly, black veins seeping out of his eyes. Chin Mo, you have already become another me. Do you think you can leave this battle unscathed? Even if I die, you will lose. You are still the same as when you were a professor. You talk too much. Chin Mo laughed as he lifted him up. His eyes were starting to overflow with red. Since you like water so much, we will do it your way. Tie a heavy object and sink. Don't worry, I won't knock you out. Things like drowning should be slowly enjoyed. Panic was evident on Kwang's face. He would rather Chin Mo raise his hand and shoot him. He had never expected Chin Mo to use such a method. He was awake but couldn't save himself. Was he going to let him have a taste of all the suffering that person had gone through? Kwang wanted to resist. But once he lost the psychological battle, he would no longer have any advantage over Chin Mo. In less than 2 seconds, Kwang realized that something had cut his wrist. Anyone with a little experience would know what it would be like to be thrown into the water after cutting one's wrist. The more he struggled, the faster the blood would flow. Moreover, there was a heavy object tied to Kwang's legs. There was a muffled sound of falling into the water. He didn't even have the chance to surface. Unless he bent his body and removed the heavy object from his legs. But just like what had been said, the more he moved his hands in the water, the faster the blood would flow. Moreover, the loss of blood left him with no energy to untie the knot. Actually, all high-level psychologists had learned how to untie knots. This time, Kwong couldn't make it. At the start, he was still struggling. When he couldn't breathe, blood started to spread on the surface of the lake. Gradually, his fingers stopped moving, and his whole body sank deeper and deeper. The speedboat had stopped. Chin Mo stood in the cabin, his head throbbing. He took the opportunity to sit down. Blood slowly dyed his eyes. Have you heard of a story? The story went like this. In the Bible, the archangel in charge of the divine world, Michael. He was as noble as snow and had the most beautiful appearance. He was the light of the entire divine world. But no one knew that the archangel had lost all emotions when he was maintaining order in the human world. He sacrificed his flesh and blood to save people time and time again. But when he was attacked by others, he understood that humans were just like that. Because he had seen all the darkness. Regardless of the situation, even if he passed by the shore, his holy battle robe wouldn't be tainted when he was guiding others. Until he met someone. The most rebellious fallen angel, the young Lucifer. Michael's emotions returned. At first, he was impatient. Then, he wanted to see that person. After all, from the start, that person had provoked him. At that time, Lucifer's devil consciousness hadn't been activated. When he lay in his arms, he was like an obedient little devil. Michael thought that the two of them would be together for a long time. Until the divine world received a letter from the human world and launched the largest war. His most beloved Lucifer walked out of the raging fire and was burned beyond recognition. From then on, when Michael waved the sword in his hand, there was only coldness. He was in a high position. He killed people like flies. And now, Chin Mo was like Michael. Under the dim yellow light. He was half lying in the cabin, as if he didn't care how much blood was on his hands. The setting sun dyed his eyes red. Elegant, mysterious, noble, these words still suited him. But anyone who saw him at this time would know. This wasn't the Chin Mo they knew. Chin Mo tilted his eyes as if he was admiring the approaching night. In this state, he was even more hesitant to move forward like the speedboat with the red flag. At this moment, there were rolling waves. Black bats flew up from the bottom of the lake. A figure jumped onto the speedboat that was stained with blood. People watched from afar. The youngster took off the water shield in front of his forehead. His hair seemed to be dripping water. Major General Chin, who was sitting on the ground, reached out and grabbed his neck. In an instant, almost everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Young Master Tang, who was standing at the front, realized a problem. Chin Mo's hypnosis is complete. The highest order was that once Chin Mo got into an uncontrollable state, they had to bring him back and let the higher-ups make a decision. How exactly should they handle the situation? But now, they didn't dare to go near him. He was too dangerous. Chin Mo watched the youngster in front of him and smiled slowly. That smile was evil and bloodthirsty. A prey that came to your doorstep. Bo Jiu couldn't breathe. Her gaze landed on the pair of completely unfamiliar eyes. Her heart felt as though it was being cut by a knife, but she was smiling. She found it hard to speak. Brother Mo, it's fine that you forgot about me when I was young, but how can you forget about me now that I've grown up? Brother Mo. Chin Mo inched closer to the youngster's face. How can I have such a short brother that can't even lie? In reality, Chin Mo couldn't understand why he released his grip instinctively when he felt a little uncomfortable. It was as though he was possessed. Forget it. The youngster couldn't do anything to him. Anyway, if he dared to move, he could use the poker card to slit his throat. But Chin Mo didn't expect that. The moment he released him, the the youngster hugged himself. His voice was slightly hoarse. "Brother Mo, this time, it's my turn to bring you home." Chapter 1263. Go home. Chi Nemo glanced at the person hugging him, reaching out to lift the youngster's chin. This person was really interesting. Didn't he see the blood on his hands? Still, he didn't see the person who was no longer breathing. There was so much blood. It was obvious he was the killer. The speedboat on the lake. No one dared to approach him. But this youngster came over as though he wasn't afraid of death. What exactly was he trying to do? Chi Nemo scanned her face before speaking slowly. "The people behind you don't seem to have any intention of bringing me home." At this moment, Bojio remained neutral. "I'm not on the same side as them, I'm in the underworld." Chi Mo's side profile didn't reveal any emotions. Especially now, he was smiling, the cards in his hands never leaving. It was obvious he didn't believe her. "You called me brother just now, are you my younger brother?" "No." He thought the youngster would admit it. After all, it would lower his mental defenses. Chi Nemo didn't expect to hear a negative answer. His brows were about to arch. The young man leaned forward, and those light-colored lips touched his lips. Chi Nemo stilled. He could feel the breath on the youngster's body and the slightly chilly softness. There was a tinge of candy, spreading from his lips. It was so warm that he didn't push the youngster away immediately. Then he heard the youngster's voice again. "I'm your sugar daddy, we're a couple." Chi Nemo paused for a moment. Her gaze landed on the young man's slightly upturned lips, and she reached out to press his head down. She tilted her body slightly, and her breath blew into the young man's ear. "You mean, not only did I fall in love with a boy, but I'm also being kept by this boy?" "Brother Mo," Bojio smiled, not denying his words. Instead, she held onto his hand and moved it towards her chest. The softness on his palm made Chi Mo's fingers pause, his brows furrowing slightly. A girl. She was so thick-skinned. But the youngster was like a little gangster, completely unaware of her thick skin. She inched closer to the tip of his nose. "Your favorite feeling?" "Interesting." The more Chi Mo looked at him, the more interesting he found him. He lifted his eyebrows slowly. "Indeed, I don't like those that are too big. Other than being small, you don't have any other good points." Bojio. Why didn't the Almighty forget his venomous tongue even after turning dark? "However, when it comes to inspecting goods, I still need to do this to know if it's to my liking." Chi Nemo reached out and pulled Bojio into his arms. Under the cover of the black trench coat, his hand had already reached under her clothes. It was hard not to like her waistline. It was smooth, porcelain white, and delicate, just like a piece of top-grade jade. The moment they touched, Chi Nemo fell in love with the feeling. His eyes darkened as if he hated the influence this person had on him. Without changing his expression, he reached out and pushed the young man to a safe place. "What is it?" Bojio blushed. Her ears were burning from the kiss. When Chi Nemo saw this, he smiled, his eyes filled with danger. "Since you are my sugar daddy, shouldn't you be the one to distract the speedboats on the lake?" Bojio sensed his resistance towards the military uniform. And in those deep eyes, there was a vicious aura that constantly floated out. It was a completely different emotion. But even so, he was still him. "What is it?" Chi Nemo tucked her hair behind her ear and smiled slowly. "You don't agree. You said we are lovers but you can't even do this." Bojio looked at him, her eyes clear and intelligent. "If that's what you want, I can do it." With that, she turned. She met the eyes of the person standing at the front of the boat without giving any orders. Before Bojo could speak, a voice came from the other side. Chinemo has to go back with us. Someone will handle the rest. This was a direct rejection of everything Bojo wanted to say. Since that was the case. Young Master Tang, you should know that I won't hand him over to the military in his current state. Bojo knew that even if she returned with them, the Almighty would receive proper arrangements. But psychologically. Or perhaps, the outcome would be the same as before. Chinemo wasn't suited to have a military rank anymore. Out of consideration for everyone's safety, they would allow him to return to Jiang City. He had done so many things. He didn't hesitate to give up his favorite esports. He allowed himself to fall into such a predicament once again. In the end, he could only receive such treatment. Because he was no longer the Chinemo of the past. The military wasn't wrong. He was too dangerous now. If Kawang could hypnotize someone in a short period of time. But now, he had all the abilities to control people's hearts. Anti-reconnaissance, combat ability, long-range sniping, even the basic reactions of his body. He was incomparably familiar with the military's tactics. Once he turned dark, the military would definitely be wary of him. Other than herself, Bojo didn't trust anyone else. She was afraid. Afraid that they would treat him as a psychopath like Kawang and raise him in a place where he wouldn't have to worry about food or clothing but wouldn't be able to escape. That wasn't her pet. Her pet had been a little prince since he was young. Arrogant, disdainful, and righteous. He was the most suitable person to be a god. He should have been spotless. How could she allow them to treat him like a virus and isolate him, regardless of the method? I want to bring him away. Bojo looked at the figure and smiled slowly. If we can't resolve this peacefully, I have other methods. I believe young Master Tang wouldn't want to be my enemy. The figure didn't move, his tone calm. Z, have you ever thought about the consequences of bringing him away? The military will put you on the wanted list, but that isn't important. More importantly, are you sure he doesn't have any ulterior motives? You should be aware of the danger he is in now. Perhaps, the moment you bring him away, he will control you to do whatever he wants. Chinemo smiled. He hadn't expected such a smart person to be in front of him. It seemed like his plan wasn't going to succeed. I can bear any consequences. I've said it before, this time, it's my turn to bring him home. Chinemo trembled when he heard this. He looked at the youngster very slowly. There were other thoughts in his bottomless eyes. This meant that this youngster had known about his plan. That was why she had said, if that's what you want, you can have it. She had clearly sensed that he was up to no good. She had to agree to his request. Chapter 1264. Bojo didn't notice the change in the gaze of the person beside her. Even Chinemo didn't notice the coldness in his eyes. There was a tinge of interest and gentleness in them. The rays of the evening sun shone into the deep lake. It was deep and unfathomable. Besides young Master Tang, there was someone else in charge. His stance was firm. Chinemo must be brought back. Young Master Tang remained silent. Bojo laughed, blowing her hair into the air. There was a hint of mischief in her voice. Then we can only fall out. Who is he? How dare he speak to me in such a tone? Young Master Tang glanced at the person beside him, smiled, and took a step back. What he meant was, since you want to interfere, then you can. Of course, Bojo noticed his actions. As long as he didn't stop her from bringing Chinemo away, there was still a chance. It was obvious that the commander beside young Master Tang didn't know who he was dealing with. He was about to warn him again when the youngster in the middle of the speedboat suddenly shouted, "Little Blackie!" Whoosh! The ripples on the surface of the lake made it impossible for people to see what was happening in front of them. Chi Nemo raised his eyebrows, but before he could do anything, the youngster had already grabbed his wrist. With the other hand, he slid open the silver electronic lighter. With a smile on his face, he threw it towards the speedboat's fuel tank. Then she pulled him and charged towards the other side. There was a loud bang. The back of the speedboat burst into flames. Sparks filled the sky. In an instant, the surrounding speedboats couldn't get close. It was a beautiful scene. The setting sun mixed with red. As expected of Z. It was a beautiful escape technique. If it had been by her side, Chi Nemo might have been able to control himself. Young Master Tang pushed his spectacles up the bridge of his nose and turned towards the confused commander. He said nonchalantly, "It seems like we won't be able to bring Chi Nemo back. Is that youngster crazy?" The commander grabbed his hair. He actually used such a method. "Why are you so calm? We need to report to the higher-ups." Young Master Tang chuckled. "I don't really care about the explanation. He has been rescued and Kawang isn't in anyone's hands. As for the rest, I'll have to trouble the commander to write a report." The commander was shocked. "Wait a minute, why am I the one writing the report?" This question. Young Master Tang reached out and patted his shoulder. "Commander, you can think about it." The more the commander thought about it, the more depressed he became. It's all that kid's fault. Does he know how many dangerous people he took away? It's a pity. If it weren't for the kid you mentioned, it would have been very difficult for us to find the exact location of this place. Young Master Tang turned around, his eyes indifferent. But it was obvious that there was already a chill inside. The commander opened his mouth, but no words came out. Firstly, that kind of gaze was too horrifying. Secondly, he had never expected the other party to be an important helper in their breakthrough to Kawang. The raging fire on the lake had already melted into the setting sun. Water was her natural enemy. She wasn't a good swimmer, and she couldn't breathe. Before she reached the surface of the Lamborghini, her hands started to lose strength. But before she could slide down, someone grabbed her left hand and lifted her up forcefully. The next moment, cold lips and the smell of tobacco seeped into her nose. Bo Jio's eyes flickered. Just when she realized what he had done to her, Chi Nemo let go of her hand. Little Blackie activated his diving mode inside. Little Black started diving inside. "Master, it was really dangerous. I thought you were going to die. I didn't even feel your body temperature just now." Bojo panted heavily, tilting her head to look at Chi Nemo, who was also drenched. His thin lips were wet, and he was overly handsome. In addition, there was a faint smile on his lips. Bojo caressed the bridge of her nose. Actually, she could have used a little more air. She wouldn't have minded. As though he had seen through her thoughts, his handsome face inched closer, smiling like a devil. "You seem to want more." Before Bojo could reply, Little Blackie exclaimed when he recognized Chi Nemo's voice. "Devil! Devil!" Chi Nemo arched a brow at the rearview mirror. "Are you calling me?" Little Blackie trembled under his gaze. This devil wasn't even suppressing his nature in front of his master. Scary, it was too scary. He didn't reply and turned off the voice system. A car that can change forms and can even talk. Chi Nemo laughed, his fingers touching her face. "Seems like my sugar daddy has an extraordinary background." Bojo tilted her head and looked at his fingers. There were small scars on them, probably because he had used poker cards to kill people. Similarly, Bojo knew that he still had half a deck of poker cards in his hands. This meant that he didn't trust her. But that wasn't important right now. Bojo opened the hidden compartment in the middle of the car. Inside were all sorts of medicine that she had gotten from the Mongolian doctor. Other than the bandages, nothing else was suitable. Bojo tore open a bag with her teeth and pulled Qin Mo's hand down. She lowered her lids and stuck the bandages on it carefully as though she was handling a treasure. Your hand is very important to you, it can't be injured. Bojo tore another bag of bandages as she spoke. From the looks of it, she was probably going to stick all the scars on his fingers. From the start, Qin Mo didn't move. He just watched the top of her head. His other hand, which was about to be lifted, lowered slightly. Qin Mo told himself. He wouldn't kill her. It wasn't necessary. Besides, it was rare to see such an idiot. He was curious to see how far she would go with him. Lovers. Qin Mo smiled, but there wasn't any warmth in his eyes. Love was of no use to him. So, my sugar daddy, where are you bringing me to? Qin Mo didn't believe that he was a sugar daddy. She wasn't good at lying. How exactly did she survive until now? Bojo paused, glancing up and smiling. Jiang City. That was right. He had to go back no matter what. The Asian Cup was still waiting for him. Besides, a familiar environment would help him recover his memory. It didn't matter where Qin Mo went. But he wasn't sure if he would get rid of the youngster midway when he lost interest. But one thing was for sure. He was now very interested in her various reactions. I'll listen to you. Let's go to Jiang City. Qin Mo lifted her hand, bringing it to his lips. It was a light kiss. There wasn't any warmth. Instead, it felt cold with water. Chapter 1265. Everyone in the operation team couldn't accept the fact that their boss had disappeared just like that. The fire on the surface of the lake was gone, leaving only the remains of the speedboat. No one knew where Qin Mo and Bojo had gone to. The scene they had seen was a sea of fire. The commanding officer had sent people to search, but they hadn't found anything. It was as if the two of them had disappeared into thin air. They were on the plane. The commanding officer told Wolf and the others, Qin Mo's mental state is extremely dangerous. Based on the bigger picture, from today onwards, Qin Mo will no longer be the general of our army. He won't be participating in any operations. Once he contacts you, remember not to reveal any internal information and inform the higher-ups immediately. Prince sat there in a daze. How did things turn out this way? If it hadn't been for his boss, this mission wouldn't have been completed. However, the result was that the boss had been defeated. Not only had he been fired, but he had also been treated as a dangerous person. Why? For the first time, as a soldier, Prince didn't say anything. The commander also knew that it would be difficult for the people sitting here to accept it for a while, so he explained the reason to them. He has received a very serious psychological suggestion. He is now completely different from before. The behavior he is displaying is very dangerous. If you have any news, you can send him to a specialized treatment place to undergo a new psychological construction. He is the best psychologist in our country, the military doctor said. General, who do you intend to get to help him with his psychological treatment? The commanding officer paused. If we can't do it domestically, we can do it overseas. I understand. The military doctor smiled. There wasn't a hint of warmth on his face. The commanding officer could sense the rebellious attitude of his soldiers. After all, they weren't his soldiers and they had just made a contribution. It wouldn't be good for him to discipline them. It would be better to leave it to General Qin. In reality, the commanding officer didn't understand. This time, it was useless to leave it to anyone. The military doctor, hunter, wolf, magician, and fatty were all people who had been through it once. Now, it was the second time. Fortunately, when their boss had woken up, he had only lost a portion of his memory. He hadn't been mentally stable, but it hadn't been like this time. It's good that he left. The military doctor suddenly spoke after a moment of silence. If our boss is with that person, it would be much better than him being sent to a treatment center. A person like boss. How could he let those treatment centers restrain him and strip away his noble and proud character? That was what was really good for him. Prince knew that it wasn't a problem for the military to make such a decision based on the bigger picture. However, he still couldn't control his heart. He rubbed his head with all his might and buried his face in his hands. He finally understood why these people liked to follow the devil so much. A few times, if it wasn't for boss's presence, they had been exposed long ago. No matter what that person encountered, he still wanted to complete the mission. However, he had saved so many people. But no one knew. In the end, he was even abandoned. At the thought of this, Prince ruffled his hair a few more times. Even if boss contacts me, I won't tell anyone his location. Fatty opened his mouth and said loudly, as long as he doesn't kill anyone, no matter what he becomes, he will always be my captain. He will always be you. Of course, the commander heard this. He frowned and turned around, wanting to pay attention to his own words. The others were also looking at him, their eyes filled with stubbornness and determination. The commander had no choice but to submit a written report to the higher-ups. The plane flew higher and higher. Everyone who was rescued was properly placed in the cabin. The signal shielding tower was broken in the middle. As for the flower fields, they were burnt to a crisp. Kawang's forces had disappeared and he had sunk to the bottom of the lake. When the local farmers heard the news, they were filled with an indescribable joy. No one was willing to plant such things and no one wanted their child to be raised as a devil. The value of this operation couldn't be measured. It was so significant that it could reduce 80% of the drug trade at the border of China. Within 3 years, no one would dare to offend the border. They weren't just saving people, they were raising the prestige of the country. However, there was a small mistake at the end of the operation. During the firefight, Fan Jia hadn't appeared because she was at the engine room. When she saw the military plane appear in the sky, she knew it was a huge crisis. Hence, she didn't appear. She changed into a farmer's uniform and returned to the village with a group of locals. When she saw the large number of planes leaving, her lowered eyes were filled with venom. It was that person who had spoiled their plan again. Fan Jia hadn't expected Z to be that person. Everything was clear now. She was like a ghost that wouldn't go away. She would be able to find them no matter where they went. She was just one step away. Qin Mo would have been on their side completely. Fan Jia knew the hypnosis was completed. If she had dragged on for another 10 minutes, Qin Mo would have been used by her master. By then, they would be together. In order to keep Qin Mo, her master would definitely make her pretend to be his girlfriend, just like in the past. But all of this had been destroyed by that person. But it didn't matter. The day before, when her master had this plan, he had already told her the code. As long as she found them there, she would be able to snatch Qin Mo back. After the hypnosis was activated, would Z still think that he would be the same as before? In this world, she was the only one who knew what that person wanted the most right now. Report. Speak. We haven't found a person called Fan Jia. Young Master Tang sat in the jeep. He paused while he was adjusting his sleeves, his gaze dimming. Tell Z that the person who impersonated her has escaped. Yes. A gust of wind blew. The sky was dyed black. She tried to send a message but realized that the communication signal had been cut. Fan Jia didn't catch it. This was a mistake in the mission. Although, this person was far from Kwang. But the more she was like this, the more careful she had to be. She was Kwang's student and to a certain extent, she definitely knew psychology. Her abilities might not be outstanding, but there were many times when the thoughts in the dark were more difficult to deal with. There were too many people who used love as an excuse to harm others. They hid behind the internet and became thieves. There were too many of such people. There were so many that Fan Jia could make use of them. Otherwise, the incident in Jiang City wouldn't have happened. Not being able to contact Z was indeed troublesome. From his perspective, the scene just now was just a case of a cicada escaping its shell. That was indeed the case. However, Bojio met with a small problem. Even though the scene of you being intimate is beautiful, I have to remind you that there's only 5% of the fuel left. Little Blackie felt that it was too hard for him to be a car. Because the moment he said that, the devil turned towards him. His gaze seemed to be saying that he was redundant. His gaze seemed to be saying that he was redundant. Little Blackie shook his rearview mirror. Didn't his master realize that the devil's presence was stronger than before? Especially that seemingly non-existent evil aura. After Bojio helped Chin Mo bandage his finger, she placed one hand on the seat and moved to the front. The fuel indicator kept flashing and the smart screen started to become unstable. She moved her finger a few times on it. How long can it last? 20 minutes, after 20 minutes, I will become a pile of scrap metal. Little Blackie felt that life was hopeless. He was afraid that he would be the first sports car to drown. 20 minutes wasn't enough to reach anywhere. Since she couldn't leave, she might as well find the nearest place to rest. Bojio's thoughts changed. She switched from automatic mode to manual mode and rushed towards the shore. Prepare to change form. Land form is in place. There was a loud splash. The moment the water bird soared into the sky, the black Lamborghini jumped out of its slumber. The water flowed over the glass, and the sound of splashing water made the surroundings livelier. But Bojio didn't stop. This was mostly an uninhabited area. But if she remembered correctly, there was a transfer station not far in the middle. It used to be used by the military and had long been abandoned. She could go there to get some fuel. Activate navigation. Bojio turned the back of the car as she spoke. Her actions were very suave. The car was fast but stable. Moreover, the temperature in the car was moderate. Chin Mo sat in the back seat, deep in thought. His eyes darkened with the night sky. The water on his body hadn't dried yet. His lips were burning. Chin Mo frowned. He probably knew what was wrong with him. Actually, his body temperature had been high from the start. But he had been in the water and he couldn't show any weakness at this moment. Even if he was an idiot. But no one really knew what she was thinking. Chin Mo closed his eyes, intending to take a break. He didn't expect the person who was driving to stop the car. His body was half suspended, and he reached out a hand to place his palm on Chin Mo's forehead. It wasn't an illusion, you have a fever. The coldness on his forehead made Chin Mo feel much better, but he didn't admit it. Instead, he smiled. It's just that my body temperature is slightly high. Bojio looked into his eyes. She leaned forward and tore his clothes. Chin Mo arched a brow. I didn't expect my sugar daddy to be so proactive. Bojio didn't reply. She tore his shirt and threw it out of the car window. There wasn't anyone here anyway. Without his shirt to cover him, Chin Mo's entire body was exuding a devilish aura. Do you need my help? Chin Mo held her hand. Bojio glanced down. I don't really need it, I just removed my clothes. That's a pity, I thought you would do something to me. Chin Mo noticed that this guy seemed to be in a bad mood. He didn't know why his chest felt a little tight. His body temperature must have been too high, affecting his bodily functions. While thinking like this, the young man leaned forward and kissed the corner of his eye. He suddenly smiled. "When you're better, I'll do something to you." Chin Mo paused. This guy was indeed an idiot. His fingers changed and he wrapped them around her waist, burying his face into the other party's slender neck. His voice was still indifferent. "I do have a headache, so I'll have to trouble my sugar daddy." "All right." Bojo reached out and hugged him back. In that instant, Chin Mo seemed to see a tail wagging behind this guy, the kind with 2 ears on his head. Surprisingly, it made people want to laugh. It was probably because the young man smelled good. Gradually, Chin Mo's eyelids closed and he sank into darkness. But even so, he did not let go of the poker cards in his hand. Bojo glanced at the back seat. The car sped up again. It was normal for him to distrust her. After losing their memories, everyone would immediately believe the words of others. Not to mention someone like the Almighty. Nothing was more important than him being by her side. Bojo swept a glance at the building outside. The building was well hidden. If it hadn't been for the special navigation system in the little black car, they wouldn't have been able to find such a place. After all, it was a military important place. Even if it was abandoned in the past, it would still be dangerous. It was a lawless area and they were most afraid of encountering other factions. Bojo was very careful. If it was her alone, she wouldn't be like this. But now that she had the Almighty with her, she had to drive to a place with some living conditions. "Master, I can only last until here." Little Blackie's voice had never been this heavy. It was obvious that he couldn't keep up. Bojo patted the steering wheel and opened the car door. She walked in the darkness, her footsteps silent. In her hands were the poker cards she had taken from Chin Mo. "Master, I can only last until here." Little Blackie's voice had never been this heavy. It was obvious that he couldn't keep up with the speed. Bojo patted the steering wheel and opened the car door. She walked in the darkness, her footsteps silent. In her hands were the poker cards she had taken from Chin Mo. It wasn't impossible. Many local forces would look for abandoned military bases. Fortunately, there wasn't anyone here. It was probably because of the low temperature. After observing for 5 minutes, Bojo lost her senses from the cold. After confirming it was safe, Bojo held onto the tree branch with one hand and jumped down. It was a military important place in the past, so it was easy to find fuel. There were a lot of abandoned military vehicles there. Bojo slid down and checked the fuel tank. Then she took something over to make it easier for her to collect the fuel. She then thought of a way to open the fuel tank. There wasn't any other danger. It was just too cold. Bojo started shivering when she got the fuel. When she reached the Lamborghini, her lips turned pale. Fortunately, there was a heater in the car. Once the fuel tank was full, the smart system automatically adjusted the temperature to the highest. At this moment, Bojo felt her fingers go numb. She shook them and felt better. She wanted to test the Almighty's temperature again. Chapter 1266. In the meantime, Bojo connected to the internet. First, she used the navigation system to search for news in the country. Fortunately, it was a confidential mission. Hence, the Almighty's situation wasn't reported. Even the details of the mission were still classified as an S-grade secret. No one knew what had happened. But deep down, Bojo knew that the Almighty's family was different. With his current predicament, his family would definitely receive news. Many people assumed that once Chin Mo received news, he would definitely contact the operation team. They hadn't expected this. The first person to receive Chin Mo's message was Movie Queenin. The call was from Bojo. It was snowing heavily overseas. When Movie Queenin received the call, she was on her way to the airport. Her assistant was worried that she would be cold, so she hurriedly placed a coat over her. Everyone knew that Movie Queenin wasn't in her best condition that day. Hence, she hadn't been filming. They also knew that she had booked a plane ticket to fly back to China. Something seemed to have happened at home. It wasn't an exaggeration to describe Movie Queen Anne's current state. Her assistant had never seen this aristocratic young lady before. When had she ever been so upset? Even her eyes were red. "Hello." Bojo could tell that she had been crying. She paused before saying, "Auntie, it's me, Joe. Brother Mo is with me now." When Movie Queenin heard this, she stopped abruptly, her eyes bursting with joy. She couldn't help but cover her mouth. That's good, that's good." She couldn't stop saying those 3 words. Her raven black hair slid down her cheeks like silk, blocking her tears. Bojo was a little clumsy in front of an elder. "Don't worry, I'll take good care of Brother Mo. I know, Joe, thank you." Movie Queenin controlled her emotions, sniffling. At this moment, she was like a young lady again. "I've always been at ease leaving my cold little fellow in your hands. But tell me the truth, is he not in a good condition?" "A little." Bojo took a moment before deciding to be honest. "He lost his memory." Movie Queenin was on the verge of collapsing. But she knew that from the moment her son had decided to carry out this mission. She knew what the consequences would be. Because of this, she hadn't picked up Mr. Chin's calls for many days. She knew the Chin family's burden. But she still felt sorry for her son. When he was young, her son was smarter than her. She even felt that he did not need her company at all. Because the Chin family's education seemed to be like this. But his son was very sensible. No matter how cold his personality was, he did not show any weakness when it came to protecting her. He remembered that he was only 5 years old at that time. She went to a dinner party and someone tried to force her to drink. At that time, Mr. Chin was not there. His small body stood in front of her like a little prince. "Sir, my mother doesn't drink. Besides, hasn't anyone taught you how to treat a lady?" He spoke in English and didn't make a fuss. With just a pair of eyes, he made a foreigner lose face. But she spent very little time with him. Mr. Chin arranged a lot of classes for him every day. His emotions were getting weaker and weaker, and he didn't even like to talk much. By the time she realized it and wanted to make up for it, it was already too late. Just like 3 years ago, she watched as he carried out a mission. Ever since then, he found it hard to fall asleep. It was as if a part of his heart had died along with that mission. Until Joe appeared. Even though Movie Queenin didn't come into contact with military matters, she knew the reason for her son's departure. Because his mental state was no longer suitable to stay in the military. She had heard everything that Mr. Chin had said in the study room. Her son had been hypnotized. Once it was touched, he would turn into another person. This person would definitely be extremely dangerous and become the most difficult criminal to deal with. Hence, he was no longer suitable to stay in the military. At that time, Movie Queen Anne's heart had really ached. As a mother, what exactly was wrong with her son? He had risked his life and ended up like this. She had expected this outcome when she went overseas this time. She had been afraid that no one would dare to approach him. Fortunately, Jill was there. Movie Queen Anne held onto the escalator and inhaled deeply. But she still couldn't make a sound. In the end, she steadied her breath and said, "Even if you are a boy, Joe, you have to stay by his side because you are the only one he has." That was a mother's request from the bottom of her heart. But Bojo's hand paused. She had assumed that movie queen and would have found out about her identity. Now that she thought about it, it might have been because of the filming. She had seen movie queen and state during filming. She wouldn't pick up any calls and would only head back to the N family's house. Most of the time, she would go to get her clothes. Besides, the news within the country wouldn't be immediately synchronized with the international news. Besides, she wasn't a big shot. Bojo replied guiltily, "Actually, there is something that I have always wanted to tell Auntie, and you don't have to tell me, Auntie knows everything." Movie queen and smiled and wiped her tears. "Auntie knows that you have always liked each other. Sister, he and I have already discussed it. Once you enter university, the two of you will head to Switzerland to register your marriage. As for the child, you can get a surrogate. If you don't want a surrogate, you can adopt the child." But now, Mo has lost his memory. At the end, movie queen Anne's mood dropped. Bojo arched a brow. "You discussed it with my mom." She agreed. Sister, he didn't agree at the start. Movie queen and acted like a child and started to take credit. After that, I recommended many movies and novels to her and introduced her to a few successful people in your circle. She started to understand and accept it. To be honest, I couldn't accept it at the start as well. It isn't because you aren't good, it's because this path is too difficult for you. But after some thought, what's so difficult about it? There are many outstanding people overseas like you. My little Ice doesn't seem to dote on you, but I know that only you can make him smile. No one else can. You don't have to worry about the future. Since Mo isn't in politics, I haven't wanted him to stay in the Chin family for a long time. Coincidentally, he will take my surname and you don't have to worry about his father. If he dares to object, I will prepare the divorce papers tomorrow." Adjutant Zhang listened to his wife's words and said quietly, "The chief won't agree." "I don't care if he agrees." Movie queen and exuded an elegant beauty even when she was angry. Bojo listened. She knew that movie queen and was suppressing her anger. She couldn't possibly cause the Almighty's mother to divorce his father. "Auntie Anne, listen to me." Bojo coughed lightly. "When I was young, my mother fought for a better life for me so that I wouldn't be bullied by that mistress. I was raised as a boy from a young age, from my actions to the way I dress. In reality, I'm a girl." Movie queen instilled. Her beautiful eyes widened in disbelief. "W girl?" Bojo braced herself and replied, "Yes. That. It was rare for movie queen and to be at a loss. "My little Ice," Bojo coughed again. "Brother Mo already knew." "You said he already knew." Movie queen Anne's beautiful eyes widened. "He never told me about it, he even hinted that your relationship would be difficult. He said that if I liked you, I should settle down with you as soon as possible. That way, I wouldn't have to ask Sister he for your hand in marriage when you found a girlfriend. This kid is really," even though he was her biological son, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But the only person who could make her son so childish, to the point of resorting to such underhanded methods, was this kid. "No, I was planning to let both of you wear suits on your wedding day, hence, I sent the measurements over. Now, I'm going to change it into a wedding gown, yes, change it into a wedding gown. I'll contact Robert later." "Joe, what kind of wedding gown do you like? Is it Chinese or Western?" Bojo hadn't expected the topic to develop in this direction. However, she had never been a shy person. "Anything is fine, once Brother Mo and I return and after the Asian Cup, we'll get married." Movie queen and smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude. "All right." She was clear that no one would marry a dangerous person who had lost her memory without hesitation. Except for Joe. Perhaps she understood why her little Ice was so fixated on Joe. She had never been liked like this before. Anyone would have softened their heart. They would never accept another person. But the fact that Jill was a girl made movie queen and overjoyed, her face filled with excitement. She didn't want to return to the country and immediately called the designer. Deputy Zhang was still thinking about how to explain to his boss. On the other hand, it wasn't easy to find an inn in the MT area since it was such a place. Fortunately, Bojiu was lucky and she could speak the local language, so she managed to find a small inn. But there weren't any good accommodations here. There definitely weren't any double standards. The hot water wasn't too hot and the bed was extremely narrow, but it was enough for 2 people. Other than a wooden chair, there weren't any other facilities in the room. Qi Nemo woke up in the middle, turning his head to look, his arm resting on someone's shoulder. She continued, "You probably haven't stayed in such a place before, but it's good that the bed is small, you can hug it to sleep." Her intentions were too obvious, she was still acting like a sugar daddy. How could there be such a sugar daddy in this world? Even Qin Mo didn't notice the smile on his face. Then he shut his eyes, his entire body turning cold. It was probably because of the nap in the car, his stamina was starting to recover. Bojiu watched the person sitting on the chair, heading down to get a pot of hot water before pouring it into a cup, using a cotton swab to moisten Qin Mo's lips. Qin Mo knew what she was doing, but he didn't know how far she would go. She didn't even touch his lips 3 times. Her voice rang in his ears again. "It's too troublesome, we've already kissed many times." Qin Mo listened without a change in expression. Before he could react, a softness was imprinted on his lips. It was still as fragrant as ever, even the water that entered his mouth was slightly sweet. Qin Mo frowned, but in the end, he didn't push the person who was obviously taking advantage of him away. "Isn't one mouthful too little?" Bojiu bent her back, her expression serious. Then she lowered her head. Just like that, Qin Mo was kissed 3 times. On the 4th time, Bojiu realized a problem, deciding to remove his pants as well. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to get on the bed. But she leaned over, the moment she moved her belt, her eyes opened slowly. That pair of closed eyes slowly opened. They were very deep, and even his voice was a little hoarse. "What do you want to do to me?" "MH." Before Bojiu could reply, Qin Mo flipped his hand. Qin Mo flipped his hand and pinned her onto the floor with his bare upper body. His breath was hot. "Your clothes are wetter than mine. Do you want me to help you take them off?" Qin Mo's left hand had already reached into her shirt, touching the skin that made him comfortable. His thin lips lifted slightly. "You can take the chance to tell me how we interacted in the past." She wasn't sure if it was because of his hot breath or Qin Mo's actions, but her body started to heat up. Color finally returned to her lips. Bojiu felt that this was a good opportunity. She glanced up. "You used to listen to me. Is that so?" Qin Mo didn't stop, arching a brow. "If I ask you to go east, you definitely wouldn't go west. You liked me a lot and thought of many ways to confess to me." "Oh." Qin Mo paused, seemingly pondering over her words. Bojiu reached out and hugged his neck, a smile on her face. "Look at my face, Brother Mo, you should know that there are many people chasing after me. That's why you often feel threatened and jealous. Do you think I've lost my mind after losing my memory, or is it because of the fever?" Qin Mo lifted her chin slowly. "Do you think I'll do what you just said?" Bojiu didn't seem embarrassed at all. "Yes." Qin Mo looked at the girl who was asking for a yard after being given an inch. Suddenly, he placed the tip of her red ear between his lips and said evilly, "If it's really like what you said, then I'm very proactive in bed." At this moment, Bojiu realized where his hand was. Her body kept feeling hot. The current Almighty was really hard to deal with in certain aspects. The moment Bojo thought about it, she felt as though someone had bitten her neck. "So, my sugar daddy, how do you like me to serve you?" Chi Nemo smiled, leaning forward to kiss the place he had bitten, a dangerous glint in his eyes. Chapter 1267. Her head started to spin and even her breathing was hot. She wasn't sure if it was because of the hypnosis. The Almighty's most unscrupulous side burst forth. Even the way he kissed had changed a lot. It was evil and cold. Indeed, it was unstoppable. The numbness from her neck didn't allow her time to think. The slight itch was accompanied by a slight pain. It felt as though she was being embraced by a vampire. It was written in a book. The moment he kissed my neck, everything seemed to disappear. Only that wonderful comfort was left, making her drown in it. She could smell the scent on his body, the sweetness that made her sink deeper. You will never forget the scenery you saw at that time. It was like a falling meteor, her entire body yearning for more. Bojo reached out and hugged Chi Nemo. Her slender neck stretched out, like a pure maiden sacrificing herself to the devil. Chi Nemo's gaze darkened, his thin lips inching closer. Just as he was about to take another step, he realized that her face was unusually red. Her body temperature was higher than his. And why was there a wound on her hand? It seemed to have been cut by a metal wire and there was even blood. Had it been when she had gotten out of the car to look for oil? She was indeed an idiot. They had already reached this stage. She had actually driven all the way. Chi Nemo couldn't describe his feelings. His pupils constricted slightly. There seemed to be something slowly overflowing from his chest. It was a little stuffy but not completely stuffy. But it was very hot, as though it was coming from inside her body. Especially when her breathing was so close to him, including her heartbeat that wouldn't lie. All these things added together made it hard for him to continue his original actions. He wanted to play with her fiercely before leaving. After all, he didn't believe a single word that came out of her mouth. For example, her sugar daddy. Chi Nemo's fingers brushed past her face, his voice low. "Get up. MH." Bojo's head was still heavy, she couldn't understand what he was saying. Was he angry? Why was there a smile on his lips but there wasn't any warmth in his eyes? Chi Nemo looked at her, bent down, and carried her horizontally. He strode into the bathroom and tore off her top in a few moves. It was too sudden, Bojo couldn't block in time. Under the light, it was an alluring expanse of snow white. Whether it was the collarbone or the shoulders, it was a symbol of a young girl's height. They were so beautiful that people couldn't take their eyes off them. Chi Nemo's eyes dimmed slightly when he saw this scene. Even his fingers paused for a moment. He seemed to be enduring something. Swoosh. He pulled out a towel and wrapped her up. However, that person was still smiling. "Brother Emo, what's wrong?" Chi Nemo tilted his head and pinched her chin. "Don't you know you have a fever?" Bojo paused, her expression a little dazed. Indeed, she hadn't noticed that her body temperature had risen. She muttered to herself, "No wonder I started to feel dizzy." When Chi Nemo heard her words, he didn't know why, but he suddenly couldn't maintain his current face. He had originally planned to use this appearance to get closer to her and achieve his goal. Chapter 1268. She was only concerned about the other person and didn't care about herself at all. Chi Nemo didn't like her behavior and even more so, he didn't like her affecting his emotions. Bojo glanced at him, suddenly understanding his actions. She reached out and hugged his waist, smiling faintly. "Brother Emo, you're concerned about me." Chin Mo's gaze froze. He couldn't turn his head away and scoffed. He pinched her hair between his fingers and said flirtatiously, "Aren't you my sugar daddy? Of course I have to care. Otherwise, who would give me money to spend? You seem rather familiar with your position." Bojo coughed as she spoke, the smile on her face never fading. Chin Mo frowned. "What's wrong with your body? It wouldn't be like this if it was just a fever." "Asthma." Bojo was indeed having trouble breathing. Chin Mo watched her, an inexplicable sense of irritation in his chest. Regardless of his motive for being by her side, he didn't like to see his plaything in such a state. "You can't breathe." "A little." It wasn't too serious. Bojo was aware of her body condition. Chin Mo held onto her waist, lifting her upwards. "Let's change the way you breathe." Before Bojo could finish her sentence, he lowered his head and kissed her. The minty breath seemed to be able to lower her body temperature. The air in her mouth was so fresh it made her yearn for it. Kissing was an addictive thing. Especially when it was with the Almighty. Her breathing wasn't unbearable anymore. Just a little more and he would kiss her again, his fingers caressing her ears. Gently, as though he was treating a pet. Her heart was beating erratically. That seemed to be the most beautiful part. When the kiss ended, he pressed his forehead against hers, his breathing unstable, his gaze deep. "It's sweet and satisfying." What did he mean by sweet and satisfying? In the past, the Almighty would never say that. Bojo's face heated up, the discomfort from her illness alleviated. But at this moment, she realized she was completely naked. Even though she was wrapped in a fur-colored bath towel, it was just a thin layer. It wasn't useful at all. The Almighty's chest was right in front of her. The lines were clear, as if they had been carved out. When he stood up, the mermaid lines were even more obvious. But his hands just hugged her, his fingers caressing her softness, and his eyes were filled with vampire-like wickedness. Yes, and very smooth. The numbness brought about by the skin contact made her legs lose some of their original strength. In the past, Bojo had never known that getting close to someone like this would be unbearable. But now that she was in his arms, just by looking at her, her heart would beat very fast, and every movement would cause a wave of numbness. Because this was none other than her pet. "You used to call me an idiot when we were young." Chin Mo arched a brow. "Oh." Bojo replied, "At that time, I really wanted to buy you. I even smashed the piggy bank that I had saved for a long time just to get my hands on you. I even asked you how much a kilo was worth." Chin Mo smirked. "Are you an idiot? Do you think people are sold by weight?" When Bojo heard this, she paused, breaking into a smile. The exquisite little boy in her memory frowned like a prince. "Little Bojo, are you an idiot? Do you think people are sold by weight?" It was the same, even if she had lost her memory. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.